finance sector
already.
Okay,
It's live.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম, মান্নান বলছি।
হাসান।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম, ভালো আছেন আপনি? ভালো আছেন?
আসসালামু আলাইকুম
আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
প্রফেসর
জি,
মান্নান,
জি,
ভালো
সালাম।
আছেন?
হাসান যাবো আমরা?
হ্যাঁ ভাই, আমরা লাইভে আছি বর্তমানে।
Okay, let's roll.
ধন্যবাদ, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, very good morning. Welcome to this webinar on the future of liberal democracy in Bangladesh after the COVID-19 pandemic. We're very delighted that we have a very esteemed audience today with us to discuss the aspects of future of liberal democracy, particularly given the ongoing crisis and its implication on the democratic state, democratic systems across the world. Bangladesh is not an exception. Henceforth, it is very important for us to really rethink, do some retrospection, do some introspection on the basis of the existing political institutions and the structures in a very democratic country like Bangladesh. I will be speaking in English since the paper is in English, and we have a number of participants who will be joining us through Facebook, through Zoom, who essentially speaks other language than Bangla. Secondly, we have chosen English because this paper has been written in English as well. Given these facets of this particular digital webinar, we would request everyone to speak or choose the language of communication they would prefer. It could be English, it could be Bangla, and henceforth we will welcome constructive comments, positive messaging, and certainly your valuable inputs so that we can come up with a further set of recommendations that will be widely available through multiple channels of communication. With that, may I request the resident representative of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Bangladesh, Felix Kolbich, to give his introductory remarks and allow the participants to understand this particular initiative that FES and CG has undertaken. Felix, over to you.
Thank you very much. And also welcome from my side. And maybe just a short introduction also to the topic in general. And then also a bit about the background of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung and this particular project line of geopolitics that we have started recently. So maybe a little bit of background. And one of the things I would like to give as an input, maybe also for the later discussion, is that the rule of the majority and the rights of minorities are key principles in liberal democracy. And that is already something that Alexis de Tocqueville observed in his book on democracy in America. Or as John Stuart Mill once said, the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any other member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. But the state also has a duty to protect citizens from each other, or as James Madison once put it, it is of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of its rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. The idea and the principles of democracy are under threat worldwide. I would like to highlight two examples. In Germany, also as Professor Shantanu mentions in his papers, the Alternative für Deutschland is gaining power on a program raised on racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and Islamophobia, claiming that these groups should not have a place in German society, claiming that they, the Alternative für Deutschland, are the majority of the people. They also fear that the arrival of migrants undermines the German dominant culture, whatever that may be. My second example is on the EU level. Hungary is becoming less and less democratic, and its leader, Viktor Orban, coined the phrase of a liberal democracy. Yet these are not only tendencies limited to Europe, but actually a worldwide phenomenon. I don't think I have to actually mention more countries, as you're probably very well aware of other tendencies and other country examples around the world. The Friedrich Ebert Stiftung actually was founded in 1925 at a time when democracy in Germany was emerging and not particularly stable yet, and eventually collapsed in 1933 And after being abolished by the Nazi regime, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung was refounded in the 1950s. The foundation owes its information and its mission to the political legacy of its namesake, Friedrich Ebert, the first democratically elected German president. The work of our political foundation focuses on the core ideas and values of social democracy that are freedom, justice, and solidarity. Here in Bangladesh, FES has been supporting two local partner organizations, government bodies to achieve their objectives and goals in the areas of labor issues, economy, education, geopolitics, and geoeconomics through research, dialogues, and engagements such as the one today. Now, I would like to highlight a bit or more, going more in detail on this geopolitics program. And as you probably also very well aware of, Asia as a region, as a continent, has become more and more important in recent years. Asia is home to some of the largest economies and militaries in the world, as well as some of the most protracted political, ethnic, and territorial conflicts. While all actors, large and small, are actively shaping the Asian future, the continent has traditionally also been subject to global and regional power rivalries, which are now setting the parameters for competition over the future global order. In this context, FES has developed a regional project titled Navigating the Asian Century, the Strategic New Normal and Global Order of Tomorrow. Within this project, or within this program line, we have issued a number of papers. One we also published a couple of weeks ago, together with Professor Ali Rias. And now with this, as you might have seen, the COVID-19 crisis is disrupting lives across Asia and will change the social, economic, and political conditions for the coming decade. Governments across the Asia-Pacific region pursue a wide range of different strategies combating COVID-19. These strategies are likely to have lasting repercussions for democracy far beyond the end of the pandemic. Freedom and democracy have been in retreat globally, as I already said, and regionally also for the past decade, when COVID-19 might accelerate this trend. To understand the situation in Bangladesh, the paper was commissioned and Professor Shantanu Majumdar has written it. We are hoping that the paper of Professor Shantanu will contribute to the national debate around the long-term implications of the COVID-19 crisis and the country's development path. Therefore, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Shantanu Majumdar, Professor of Political Science at the University of Dhaka, for writing this paper and being here to present the key findings of the paper. Also, my heartfelt thanks goes to Mr. Zilur Rahman and his team in the Center for Governance Studies for hosting the event jointly with us today. It is also my very great honor that we have found Honorable Railways Minister, Mr. Nurul Islam Sujan, with us as our chief guest and in this intensive discussion and reporting launching event. Mr. Amir Khasrul Mahmood Chaudhry, former minister and special guest member of the National Standing Committee of the BNP, is also present here as our special guest today. We are thankful to him for his consent to be here. I would also like to express my thanks to Dr. Nazneen Ahmed, Ms. Sayyida Rizwana Hassan, I'm very sorry for that, and Mr. Noor Karbir and Professor Saeed Anwar Hussain, that they also have agreed to be part of the panel discussion today. And with this, I would like to, my last thanks would go to Professor Shahab of the Department of International Relations of the Jahangir University to be our moderator today. And therefore, I would hope that we will have interesting, insightful debate and discussion today, and that this will also be a starting point for a new discourse here in Bangladesh. And with this, I would like to hand back to Professor Shahab. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felix, for setting the agenda. And I think Felix has highlighted most of the key issues that Professor Majumdar will be discussing. Without further ado, I would like to request Professor Shantanu Majumdar to present his keynote speech, and which I think I had the privilege of reading the document, which has been written on the basis of very sound research methodology, which has highlighted multiple aspects of the debates, problems, and the growth in the liberal democracy in this country. With that note, with a very strong research methodology being presented before you, I would request Professor Majumdar to present his paper. Professor Majumdar, are you here?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shahab. So without any delay, let me begin. initially I was given 20 minutes. Now I see that I have only 15 minutes. So let me go straight away to my paper. And what I'm doing, I'm going to share my slides. Just give me just
before you start, Professor Majumdar, just a quick housekeeping note for all the participants. We would be obliged if you could keep yourself muted during the presentation of Professor Majumdar. Thank you very much.
And one note for the host, I can read a message here that the host disabled participant screen sharing. So someone who is
now you can share.
Okay, thank you. Let me try. So what I'll do, I'll just I'll not read out all the slides. I'll probably actually what I'll do in 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes time, I'll just try to touch the major issues, and then in the discussion session maybe we can talk in details. So I have 5-6 sections in this presentation: introduction, then the ongoing realities. In the ongoing realities section, I briefly discussed on 3 issues, which is self-censorship as a new normal, then opposition, the feeble and ineffective opposition, and also we talk about the subtle depoliticization process. And in the long-lasting obstacles in the way to flourishing of liberal democracy in this country, I try to shed light on several issues, which are preference for dominant party culture, and then illegal power capture and overthrowing of state principles. And then I talked about undemocratic origin and anti-democratic principle of political parties, several political parties, and then compromise with the basic of democracy and a minimum effort for institution building. And I give emphasis on 2 other issues. One is lack of enthusiasm for democratic values at the societal level. And for me, this section is important because in most cases, when we talk about democracy, we mainly talk about the crisis or problems in the political domain, but I think it's high time to shed light on the social sphere as well, to think about democracy. And I also, at the end, I end up with some sort of pessimism that I see nothing encouraging in the regional and global political landscape. And I have some recommendations, but I do not think these are important right now. I will mention it, but these are recommendations. I probably we can talk about this recommendation, but let me first discuss the ongoing realities and long-lasting obstacles, the way I understand. So first thing is kind of historical thing. We had a 24 years long movement, and then we attained Bangladesh in 1971, but the journey for democracy was short-lived because we had 2 military intervention, one in 75, another one in 82. And military rule collapsed in 1990. And at that time, there was huge expectation regarding a fresh start. And that's the same year, I would like to mention here that that's the same year when Samuel P. Huntington actually published his much discussed book, The Third Wave Democratization in the late 20th century. That's the time when numbers of countries in East Europe and many other parts of the world see the beginning of the electoral democracy. That kind of thing happened. But it did not take long for the euphoria because of the nation for liberal democracy to evaporate, mainly due to the undemocratic tussle of the democratically elected political parties. Now I'm talking about the post-90 phase. And after almost 3 decades since the reintroduction of democracy, it can be said that despite having elections somewhat regularly, that the elected governments usually complete terms and that political institutions are theoretically active, the list of the areas to improve is messy. So I mentioned here 5 things. Problems acute over the past decades. These are all pervasive ruling party, mostly rhetorical and dysfunctional parliament, absence of democracy and political parties, strict centric oppositions, and inter-party disagreement on basic principles of the state. I think all of you can see that I'm mentioning nothing new actually. What I'm trying to do actually, trying to jot down all this stuff and placing in front of you for open discussion. And what we are also witnessing is the human rights and freedom expression of the religious and ethnic minorities, free thinkers, and opposition parties are not safeguarded yet. And the last two national elections, 2014 and 2018, failed to obtain appreciation at home and abroad. These are the situation Thomas Carothers. He called this situation as a gradual country when the experts struggle to decide whether the country is democratic or not. So ongoing realities, by ongoing realities, I mean, these are the reality not necessarily started yesterday, but these are the realities reached into a new height and to some extent took a new shape during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, these are the problems we witnessed before the pandemic, but now it takes, in my view, a new height. So first one, I say the self-censorship as a new normal. And particularly because of the probably Digital Security Act, now we can see the huge kind of practice of self-censorship amongst the human rights defenders, civil society members, and journalists. And the local media outlets, think tanks, and international community report a disproportionate increase in the use of the act since the beginning of the pandemic. Another one is the opposition. In my view, opposition is feeble and ineffective right now. And it seems that during the pandemic, the governing the government seems to be enjoying a kind of free ride against allegations of performance failure and corruption in the absence of any effective resistance in and outside parliament from the opposition. And my understanding is that it started particularly since the election in 2014, and the 2018 election eroded hope for a first start, although there was certain level of hope before the election 2018. And third one is kind of depoliticization process. I'm not sure whether it is a conscious effort or it's just going on. I mean, it's a kind of a strange mixture of valid reasons, for example, undemocratic power struggle, corruption, violence, etc., and perceived wrongdoings. For example, politicians are behind all corruption, and this sometimes failure to understand the significance of the role of politicians in a democracy provokes, I would say, a section of civil society and media to undermine the importance of politics and politicians in the country. And this relentless campaign has created an apolitical and in many cases anti-political mindset. So what is going on right now during the pandemic time? The depoliticization trend from the regime side in the form of sidelining politicians in major national issues or events began subtly unfolding in recent years. However, it is not clear whether it is an informed decision of the regime. So we have plenty of evidence in front of us. For example, if we see the relief distribution to pandemic management at the grassroots level, we can see that there is no role of the, official role of the politicians. The government initiatives for pandemic management brought the issue to the forefront. The bureaucracy is in charge of all pandemic management activities. And I would like to say that it's kind of a distance maker between politicians and the electorate, and which I find to some extent actually humiliating for the politicians. Now, I'm moving to the long-lasting obstacles. My point here is that when I talk about the short-term problems, that doesn't necessarily mean these are the main reasons behind the obstacles. Instead, I try to unearth some long-lasting obstacles. For example, one is the preference for dominant party culture. I don't have time, but let me give you just very briefly. For example, when Bangladesh started its journey as an independent country, in the Constitution Assembly, out of 400 members from the Awami League, there was 400 members out of probably 403 from Awami League. And in the parliament, in 1973 parliament, Awami League had 293 seats out of 300. And one example how the dominant party culture established in this country, the ruling, I'm talking about the establishment Bakshal, for example, the ruling party decision to abolish itself and its ability to convince the main opposition party to be defunct, and then the introduction of Bangladesh Krishak Shramik Awami League highlight the all-encompassing existence of the dominant party culture in the political landscape during the country's formative phase. I'm not saying that that was good or that was bad. What I'm saying, the ruling party can be dominant. And what we see, we can say that the same trend continue even after the collapse of the first democratic regime. And the dominant party culture took a new turn during the military era for three reasons. One is the military dictators attempted wholeheartedly to make the newly formed parties unparalleled, and then disproportionate violence against the opposition, totally rigged election, and use of state resources to reward the party men were some of the common practices in this venture to make the ruling party dominant. So after the collapse of the end of the military rule in 1990, as I mentioned in the very beginning, there was a hope that, okay, maybe we have a new beginning. But the big political parties oppose the dominant party culture when they are in opposition. Unfortunately, we cannot see any evidence when the party is in power, they take any active, initiative for democratic functioning of all the major political parties in the field. The liberal and left small parties are critical about that culture, but they have no ability to influence the system. And no pressure from civil society has emerged that can affect change. So it's continuing. And then to save some time, I'm going to skip this, discussing this section. I'm just mentioning the headline, which is the illegal power capture and overthrowing of state changed the character of this country to a vast extent, and it's ruined the democratic institution or the possibility of flourishing of democratic institution vastly in the 70s and 80s. And also, we have a couple of political parties. They are, they're with an undemocratic origin and anti-democratic principles of parties. These are the parties who are formed after their leader came into power, and then they formed political parties. And we have a couple of political parties. They are totally religion-centric, and they discard the religious others. And in that sense, they, of course, do not highlight democracy. And another thing is compromise with the basic of democracy. For this point, I had long-lasting debate with my colleagues, my friends, and let me mention here that majority of them do not support my stand. But let me float my position. Share my argument here. My position here is that the inclusion of the election time caretaker government provision in the Constitution in 1996 was a big blow for the chance of liberal democracy here, because for a couple of reasons. First thing is the caretaker provision doesn't match with the history of democracy in the last couple of centuries worldwide. Second, I do not buy this point that political parties are quote unquote bad. For this reason, we can hand over power for 3 months or something like that to a group of unelected people. And also, if we see the history, see what happened during the last caretaker government from 2007. This government, what happened? They came into power with a mandate of staying in the power for 3 months, but they continued for almost 2 years. So I have argument on this. In fact, I write articles on this issue. My feeling is that at any cost, politics should be confined or should be reserved for the political players. It's
Professor Mulder,
sure.
I apologize. I'm interrupting, but certainly we have a limitation of time. I can at best allow you for another 5 minutes. Sorry for the
time is over. Are you saying that time is over? Okay,
it's already, but 5 minutes more would be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. And then minimum effort for institution building from the political party in power, and the other opposition political party and civil society as well is a long-lasting problem. And lack of enthusiasm for democratic values at the social level. We have great urge for fair election, disapproval of political violence, a brief but wide-ranging safe street movement at any and anti-rape campaign in the recent time. All of the evidences of urge for democracy. But on the other hand, if you see, a vast majority of people confuse democracy with brute majority. And then there is vocal and tacit support for undemocratic narratives and practices in the name of safeguarding and upholding one's own religion, culture, community sentiment, and social expectation. And politicians involved in war crimes can win election. These are the indications that we are supporting democracy, but at the same time, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, I don't know, I'm not sure, we are actually supporting or upholding totally anti-democratic values. So, and two final points from my side. One is what I'm thinking about the future after the post-COVID future of democracy in Bangladesh. I personally, I'm not a pessimist person, but when I think about the chance of a liberal democracy here, I do not see right now any great chance. First is because nothing is encouraging in the region and the global political landscape. I do not think Bangladesh is the only case in the world. So global scenario is not encouraging. You will see numbers of countries in the Western Europe, in the in America, for example, populism and identity politics are actually getting huge attention of the people, and this kind of politicians are actually attracted doing very well. And then in the regional in the region in South Asian countries, think about India. It's totally under to a vast extent under the capture of the Hindu ultranationalist. In Pakistan, it's military and the religious extremist. In Sri Lanka, it's Sinhala and Buddhist nationalism. Even in Nepal, kind of deadlock in constitution making and other issues. So I do not see anything encouraging outside Bangladesh. So I don't want to give up, but maybe it will take a long. So I have a couple of recommendations, but I mentioned earlier that I don't take it seriously. That's my thinking. First is I think traditional civil society organization need a wake-up call. So I have no time to discuss what is traditional civil society and what I mean by the dominant groups of civil society. But right now, a wake-up call needed that partisan civil society can do no good for democracy in this country. And the dominant groups of civil society or urban civil society should be equally vocal about fair elections and safeguarding liberal values. And they should proportionately vigilant about the activities of the government and the opposition, along with the anti-democratic social and political organizations. So continuous pressure on the party in power for fair elections and the unremitting weakening of the democratic institution are essential. And creating a scope for formal and informal interaction among the ruling party and opposition parties at the central and grassroots levels would help minimize the hate-filled, non-negotiable distance between the two mighty forces. And I also, this is actually kind of a donor-facing recommendation. The West European and Scandinavian countries with comparatively better record of liberal democracy may consider coming into the forefront. And another recommendation is positive engagement with the government by the international community is an option. And attaining liberal democracy should be the ultimate goal instead of always talking about the electoral democracy. Election is the first and foremost precondition, of course, but let's not end up with the concept of electoral democracy. And finally, international community should send a clear message to the opposition that direct and indirect involvement with the anti-democratic forces are not welcome. Okay, maybe I would like to stop here. So thank you very much all. It was kind of rapid journey from my side, but let me stop now. I'm really waiting for the discussant and the chief guest and the special guest, and also for the response of the audience. So thank you so much again for hearing me.
Thank you, Professor Majumdar. I think you have given us a plate full of issues that needs to be discussed at length, but unfortunately I had to cut you short. But certainly the issues linking self-censorship as a new normal, lack of enthusiasm, not only in the part of the political parties, but also within the society and the economic institutions remains as a very big concern, not only in Bangladesh, across the world. Then obviously you have brought in the issue of political culture, in which the strengthening of parliament, role of the politicians, and certainly the multiple forces within a system, including the left or perhaps the liberal democratic political parties, their role has to be reviewed, and perhaps to see how they can constructively have implication or perhaps push the growth of liberal democracy in this country. You have brought in the issue of civil society, which is very important, and how civil society and the pressure groups positively impact on the democratic culture of this country. You have rightly mentioned the need for formal, informal interaction among different political parties, political actors, institutions, so that the hate speech can be minimized, greater trust on the national issues can be built, and certainly there are healthy debate among the political parties, which will pave a better political culture in the country, which we aspire for and which our forefathers envisioned back in 1971. With that note, I would request very revered and our esteemed and eminent historian and professor, academic. I mean, any term is very insufficient in describing Professor Syed Anwar Hussein's stature. But I certainly had the privilege of inviting Professor Syed Anwar Hussain sir to give his valuable comment on your paper, and perhaps sir can guide us in understanding the Constitution historic genesis and of the democratic values that we envisaged back in 1971 and that we aspire to see in reality in Bangladesh. May I request, sir, to comment? Sir, unmute yourself, sir.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Shahab. And good morning and good wishes to all the distinguished participants of this very important discourse today. And I profusely and abundantly thank Center for Governance Studies for picking up the theme of discussion today. Well, a few days back, I was reading a post-editorial write-up in one of the English dailies of Bangladesh. The write-up was titled, "Is Democracy on the Retreat?" The sum and substance of that write-up was that democracy is certainly on retreat throughout the world. If that be so, let us now concentrate on Bangladesh. About a few years back, I went to the post office to buy some revenue stamps. The lady at the counter handed me the number of the revenue stamps I wanted, but she charged double. Originally, it was 5 taka per piece, but now she demanded 10 taka per piece. I queried her, "Why is this difference?" She replied, "So this is the government decision. the price has been hiked. Fine, if the government decides we have to pay for that. But my question that I asked myself while coming out of the post office was that did the government talk about the hike in the price of the revenue stamps in Parliament? I found the reply in myself that now the government took a sort of executive decision to hike the price. Then I went back to the pages of history. The American War of Independence was fought on the slogan, no taxation without representation. The House of Commons imposed a number of acts to raise revenue for reimbursing the costs that had been incurred in defending the 13 colonies. These acts were grouped together as intolerable acts by the Americans living in the 13 colonies. They fought for this. This was a democratic principle. But in Bangladesh, we simply forgot this principle of no taxation without representation. The government does simply have the right to hike the price of any item that we need and which are also supplied by the government. But the government has to ask the public representatives whether or not they could hike the price. The government didn't do. So I came to the conclusion we don't have democracy in Bangladesh. Despite all that we see around us in the name of democracy. But ladies and gentlemen, don't talk about liberal or illiberal democracy. But I don't see democracy per se in Bangladesh. What I see is what I call demosclerosis. This term is coined by conjoining the two terms, democracy and sclerosis. Sclerosis, I'm sure everybody present here would know, that is a kind of disease in which the veins through which blood circulates are at, and apparently so, we can see him or her. She is not properly active, dynamic as one human being should be. So, what I suggest or what I conclude is that we have democracy which does not properly function and which is absolutely dysfunctional. So this is my characterization of the state of democracy in Bangladesh. Second point, why is this so? Dr. Shantanu Mazumdar has very perceptively suggested quite a few scenarios about prevailing in regard to democracy in Bangladesh. I fully agree with him, and I also thank him profusely, but let me add there. We have the democratic system in our mind, but we do not have the democratic spirit in our actions. Democracy doesn't mean election to power and also to remain in power for some time. Be democratized. For example, the university. These universities and apparatus which govern the society, if, considered from the perspective of governance. But is democracy at the moment a democratic institution? If we ask this question, our answer is bound to be a mixed one, or at the same time could be absolutely negative. No university in Bangladesh functions as per democratic norms and rules. Moreover, there is corruption. Corruption permeates the society. And now there has not been any government attempt to curb corruption. Corruption and democracy cannot go together. I'm extremely sorry to say that. Next, political parties. Well, what we see at the moment from the government side, we have something like a one-wheel bike ridden by the government. Democracy, as I suggest, is a two-wheel bike. You have to ride a bike when you have two wheels. Well, in the circus, clowns do ride one-wheel bike, but he cannot go for long. He collapses. So is the case with Bangladesh. Bangladesh democracy has only one wheel, the government. We do not have effective, active, and real opposition party in Bangladesh. Why is this? Well, the government role may be one of the points to consider, but what about the role of the opposition parties per se? They themselves have many problems like leadership and organization. Moreover, if I have to be candid enough, I have to say that the two major political opposition factions, I wouldn't say political opposition party, but opposition factions like VNP and Jatiyo Party, they are conspicuous by the absence of any legitimacy in their creation and function. For example, no political party emerges in the cantonment. All political parties, as per definition of Maurice Duverger, are to emerge out of popular genus origin. So in that, we have already covered 50 years after independence. This is not at all a short time for the life of democracy. But I don't see that we did have a good beginning in 1972 with a very good constitution of 1972, promising democratic start. But unfortunately, that start was a faulty one, and it ended up into a mess, and we ended up in military rule. And finally, we emerged with democracy, but we emerged with a democratic commitment, but not with the democratic process. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I emphasize mostly leadership factor in democracy. By leadership, I don't mean only single person leadership. I also mean collective leadership, leadership at all stages of governance. That is what is lacking in Bangladesh. Leader, be it personal or collective, have to be quite democratic in mind, spirit, and also in function. That's what we do not have in Bangladesh. Democracy is something like a dream, but we cannot achieve that dream. Thank you very much indeed for giving me time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we have learned, and we now have much more thoughts to ponder upon. I can't have the audacity of summarizing your statement or remarks without any hesitation. I can claim that. But certainly, few issues that our audience can think about is the corruption and democracy. Then certainly the leadership and how the leadership can be brought back into the institutions as well as the societal structure. Sir, your comment on the democratic commitment and translating that commitment into process and practices remains as a critical factor in understanding the present state of democracy in Bangladesh, and to certainly fathom what could be the shape and structure of democracy in future, particularly in the post-COVIDian world. Sir, your comment on sclerosis certainly is one important thing. I think something we cannot avoid discussing it at some point of time, though it's a medical term or physical term, but certainly it has a metaphoric value for us to really think about. So your point on functionality, democratic mindset, whether the society is able to practice democracy, whether the human minds within the territory has enough capacity to think democratically and translate their action in a democratic manner, remains a subject that requires serious discussion. And so your point on the university, and I would rather say university as the etho or the central factor in democratic processes, remains as quite problematic these days, as you have mentioned, and as we see in the media, a lot of corruption issues coming up, which is unexpected in the case of educational institutions. So with that note, I would like to thank you very much for your kind comments and time, sir. And definitely we look forward to seeing you more often and guiding us to a better polity in future, sir. Sir, may I now request Dr. Nazneen Ahmed to make his remark as a panel discussant. And as we have discussed, we would be grateful if Dr. Nazneen Ahmed focuses on the political institutions, political governance of the financial and economic institutions, and how the national integrity institutions such as the Anti-Corruption Commission and the financial regulators can function more democratically to ensure that the development is stable, so that people's voice are heard properly, and then the rights-based development is much more visible in our political discourse and discussion, leading to a better...
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this important webinar. I think it's kind of an unusual topic that I actually discuss. Mainly I discuss on economic issues, but as Mr. Shihab Inam, he has mentioned that it's actually closely related. When we talk about democracy, when we talk about institution, economy is not out of that. And if we look at the current situation, what has been very rightly pointed out by Dr. Shantanu Majumdar and lately discussed by Professor Anwar, we see that how actually institution matters for not only for people's freedom of speech, also for economic development. But one may argue that what's wrong if we have good GDP growth and a good income for the country, the growth of the country, whether there is democracy or not, why does that matter? But if we look at the history of economic development, we find that when without good institution, we can have good growth, but that's for the short run. In the long run, actually, for the growth in the long run, institution must work properly. And then again, the opposite is also true, that when we say there is a lack of democracy in a society and there is growth, but then if we move to democracy, in the beginning, in many cases, we see a lower growth rate, but in the long run, we will have higher growth rate. So if we really have to continue with economic growth, the institution matters. And currently, even during the COVID-19, we have just witnessed that our per capita income has increased by 9% compared to last year. And many people are asking, I was asked that, how is that possible and why don't we see that? Why do we also see lots of poor people in the society? That takes our attention to the institution, because the growth in per capita income is the truth. But at the same time, we also see huge inequality in this economy. And that means institution is not working properly to collect money from the rich and the trickle down effect to the poorer people. So if as Dr. Shihab rightly mentioned, that how the integrity in the financial organization can support this, and that will actually help to the trickle-down effect of growth. If we look at, I see Mr. Majid here, maybe he will explain, Dr. Majid here, he will explain more. But if we look at our tax regulation, and if we look at our NBR and the functioning of NBR, we have been talking about the transparency, efficiency of NBR for a long time, so that we can have more revenue to work and more revenue collected, so that we can have more money available for our social protection activities, for poor programs for the poor, for infrastructure development, and so on and so forth. But what we still see that the tax GDP ratio is not even 10% of our GDP. So that's we have been talking about the automation of NBR for a long time, but we haven't seen that yet. We have been talking about the electronic VAT collection system, electronic machines in the shops and markets, but we don't see that for a vast majority of the businesses. So I think even if we promise to change the institutional capacity, transparency, and everything, we don't have a monitoring system of whether that is happening or not. Why is it taking so long for the automation of NBR? This is just one question. Well, when we see, even during COVID, when government gave the stimulus package, we have witnessed that the stimulus package for the large industries, those were distributed very fast. But stimulus package for the small industries, only 75% has been distributed so far. Why is that? The responsibility was with the banking sector. But when we, whether there was any monitoring that whether they were really disbursing the loan to those who need them the most. The thing is, to the bank, an organization or an industry which has faced devastating effect from COVID-19, that is not a good client for a bank. So bank, for very good reason, will not give loan to those industries which have faced lots of, which has even lost their capital, which has lost their business. So they preferred the large industries, and that's why I think there is the question of institutional integrity. Government even announced the credit guarantee scheme. So guarantee, if a small enterprise fail to repay the money, government guarantees to support the bank, but still that loan was not disbursed to the small industries properly. Even that, the out of small and medium enterprises, the loan actually went to the medium enterprises, not to the very small and micro enterprises. So this is one example where you have lack of integrity in the institution. And also we, in recent times, we see that in important positions, when we are talking about financial institutions and others, there are people, but the perception among people is that if it is about a new business, if it is about loans and credit, preference is giving to the people who have the power. When I say power, it's not about only ruling party political power. It's power from whatever sense. It can be from the political party, backed by political party. It can be backed by huge money that they have. So those who have power, they are growing. They are becoming bigger and bigger. And that's why when we see that there is growth in GDP, but at the same time, we see huge number of poor people still in this society. We see, according to the even official statistics, we have 20% poor people. So that's why it's very important when we are just focusing on development, we should focus on how the institutions are working. If the institutions are not strong enough, we will not have a strong base of economic development. And maybe our dream of becoming a rich country by 2041 will not be achieved if we do not have strong institution, and that the institution that all works for all people. At the end, I would like to say that we really have to remember, পশ্চাতে রেখেছো যারে সে তোমাকে পশ্চাতে টানেছে। So আমি যদি কাউকে পশ্চাতে রাখি, they will pull us behind. So we really have to think of all those people whom we are leaving behind at the moment. So democracy and economic development are closely linked, and when we are thinking of moving towards liberal democracy where institution works should work on its own, institution, rule of law should be there. From the economic point of view, we should practice that rule of law now, and we should have our institution working for the poor people. We should have our institution working for the redistribution process, whether it's for revenue generation, it's for banking system, whether it's for investment, for big infrastructure. Let us also, we should talk about all those corruption in implementation of the big projects. I think that is loss of our resources that could be utilized in other sector. So all this calls for good institution and institution working for people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nazneen. I think that is fascinating. I mean, you have covered very interesting points, and which deserves greater debate. Institutions and how institutional leadership, integrity of institutions, and particularly accountability and transparency within the institutions matter. And certainly that is heavily linked with the liberal economy and economic development. That would certainly trickle from the top to bottom. I think the market plays a very important role. The taxation process, infusion of technology into the taxation and financial governance, as you have highlighted in the case of NBR and others, is of paramount importance. You have aptly brought the issue of rule of law. Very much is needed, particularly if we look at the integrated institutions like Comptroller and Auditor General's Office, SEC, and then how they create an absolute monitoring of the transparency agenda that the Republic of Bangladesh holds. I think the issue of social protection is heavily linked with transparency and transparent decision making, as you have mentioned. You have rightly mentioned, and I think this is a critical factor for political economy, particularly when you look into the banking sector and how the banking sector essentially redistributes or distributes financial stimulus, not only to the large enterprises, but also to the people who has been left behind. I think there is a question of perception and preference within the financial sector, which you have brought in. And I think that is also part of the political culture debate and political progress debate in this country. And I thank you very much for bringing the issue of 2041. If we want to be a developed state, certainly we can't keep anybody behind. I mean, leave anybody behind and try to move forward. And that's where the pro-people economic policies, economic decisions would require. Thank you very much, Dr. Nazneen, for bringing all these important and critical issues that deserves attention without further delay. Thank you very much. May I now request the journalist eminent and par excellence, of course, Nurul Kabir, who is the editor of New Age. And Mr. Kabir has been one of the eminent journalists who has always talked about liberal democracy in the country, and one of the beholder of liberal institutions in the fields of media, in the fields of journalism, and the governance of journalism as well. And we would be greatly obliged if Mr. Kabir kindly addresses the key points that Professor Majumdar brought in the context of information openness and its linkages with the inclusive governance and institutions. And that is heavily linked with the spirit of 1971 and, of course, the constitution that our forefathers thought about.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear as always.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Well, since the subject is liberal democracy and the future of liberal democracy in Bangladesh, I would share my experiences as how we, our generation, or particularly myself, grew up to be a liberal democrat, or how did we perceive that. I'm sure that all of us here present know the whole thing, but at times perhaps it needs to remind people when discussing certain issues of the history. For example, liberal democracy, as all of you know, is an European product, as an idea. Now, 3-4 basic premises of the, theoretically speaking, of liberal democracy is philosophically sovereignty of the individuals, which suggests, or which dreamt of, the emergence of creative emergence of individual human being without any obstruction either from the nature or from the state. Politically, it talked about a republic, democratic republic, in which people remained at the center. Economically, is right to private property, which has eventually taken the shape of market economy. There are certain other issues that byproduct of this school of thought was, for a republic, separation of power of different wings, as all of you know, and separation of politics, between politics and religion, because basically liberal democratic movement in Holland, in France, in England, and in the United States, they all talked about the secular idea of individual emergence of human beings, which the religion must remain separate from the affairs of the state. However, while in theory, this is how the idea of liberal democracy evolved, practically for years, even for more than 200 years, it didn't evolve that way. Because talk about Holland, England, America, or France, we have seen while they were formulating the philosophical aspects of liberal democracy, in fact, in their mind was just what people of the, as the first speaker said, quoting Tocqueville, of the civilized society. And they didn't think, they didn't consider Africa, Asia, and the colonies as civilized people. So slave trades were there, black repression was there, women repression was there. It's a fact of history that only a few decades that the women have been allowed voting rights, blacks have been allowed voting rights, and slavery has gone. So in Europe, liberal democracy was centered around the freedom of the free, those who are white. And now that after decades of centuries of movements and struggles, the things have, of course, improved a lot. But at the same time, individual liberty and the class issue remains a very serious issue till today. First World War and Second World War particularly, and the war between the nations has curtailed a lot of individual liberty in the name of national security. Now, if we concentrate on the theoretical values of liberal democracy and compare it with our history and the stage that we have been at present so this should be people's sovereignty, development of a democratic republic, separation of power, separation of religion and politics, and of course, right to private property. In Bangladesh, when we are talking about the future of liberal democracy, we should perhaps remember, or we should perhaps call a spade in the sense that Bangladesh had never been a liberal democracy. The journey of Bangladesh liberation was not liberal democratic. For instance, in the main paper, we have talked about constituent assembly. Bangladesh started its journey constitutionally without a proper constituent assembly, in the sense that constituent assembly and parliament are not the same thing. When we say under the military regimes that parliament should be sovereign, it sounds very sweet because of our empirical experiences, because parliament, people's representatives have never been allowed under the military regimes to represent the people's interests the way they should do. But in a liberal democracy, parliament cannot be sovereign. People is sovereign. People, through the Constituent Assembly, elected separately, formulates a constitution under which the role, limits and jurisdictions of the MPs, the parliament members, are defined, because this is a serious political conflict of interest that a member of parliament who enacts law can also change the constitution. A member of parliament should change law under the dictates of the constitution elected by representative body, which are not the same thing. And then comes, even if the parliament enacts a law, whether this law is valid or not, under the dictates of the constitution, they must go for referendum, because in liberal democracy, ultimately people is sovereign. People are being represented in parliament for formulating law under the dictates of constitution, which cannot be formulated by the parliament. But Bangladesh Bangladesh just at the beginning of its journey marked the members of parliament elected under within the framework of Pakistan. We have called them members of Constituent Assembly. It was not rightly elected anew, because in the 9 months of Liberation War, people's consciousness had changed, people's dream had changed, people's aspirations had changed. And so if there had been a new elected Constituent Assembly, the shape of the constitution, which is the in liberal democracy is called embodiment of the people's will, would have been a little different. From then, we have always talked about the military regime and how the whole depoliticization and the decline of democracy has reached this stage. What is this stage? In the present stage, it's a prime ministerial system, and it's constitutionally done, legally, it's not illegal. And under the system, one person can be head of the executive, the same person can be head of parliament, and the same person can be head of a ruling party. This concentration of power in one hand, so no matter which it is BNP or Awami League or any political party on earth, the whole constitutionally and legally endorsed system just encourages a person to be a despot. And even if it was you and me or anybody else, this system, this legalized, constitutionalized institution is bound to give birth autocratic system. Economically, we have our eminent economists and others have already discussed. That's an economy without any accountability. It's an economy which just make the rich the richer. This is an economy that every day government statistics show that discrimination between different sections of people are just getting wider. So that the concept of equality in democracy was the core concept of equality among people. Every citizen is missing, both in politics and in the system of economy. And the question of development without democracy, don't you think that the moment someone adds the sentence that takes us back to Pakistani period Ayub regime, and those who say that election is not the most important thing, of course it's not the most important thing, but is the primary thing, that election is not that important. Doesn't it remind of General Yahya Khan, who just dishonored the people's mandate in 1971, and we fought for liberation war? So if we can look back to history and combine it to our and compare it with our present state of affairs, we are having Yahya Khan and Ayub Khan together. Not a good idea. That's not the reason that so many millions of people died and suffered for our national independence. So, under such circumstances, we can say, and we have some of us have said, and which I agree, that in the whole world, liberal democracy is declining. Yes, and we can see that liberal democracy has not ever even started in Bangladesh. Then what should we do? Since we theoretically agree that these are good things, and as a good liberal democracy that will not discriminate between men and women, that will not discriminate between this party and that party, that will not discriminate between this religion and that religion, we have to chase for that. We have to chase that dream. And this was the dream that our people in 1971 fought a liberation war for: equality, social justice, and the dignity of human dignity. These are the things that birth of Bangladesh promises to the people of Bangladesh. And those who have stood in the way of materializing these things are our enemies. Let's be very frank about it. Those who didn't allow the people to achieve equality, social justice, and human dignity are the ones who are undemocratic forces. So either we have to, as civil society, which I say, my professor Hussain, who was my teacher, and I tried to understand European history under his guidance. These are the things that we need to chase for. The spirit of liberation war. No matter, very important, that no matter who guided the liberation war, that was a great thing they did. But today, if they deviate from those basic principles of international liberal democracy and our history, they are the enemies of our dream, our democratic dreams. So the civil society, who has become partisan bodies, and thus an evil society vis-a-vis the historic need for an independent thinking social bodies.
Kabir Bhai, I have to cut you short. Apologies. I can give you at best 1 minute.
We also have to develop alternative think tanks, alternative pressure groups, alternative media. These are the things that we can start for a new struggle. And I will finish by saying, as I was inspired by Dr. Nazneen to speak a few words in Bangla, that we have problems too, and problem is getting acute still. That we have a poet called Tagore. যদিও সন্ধ্যা নামিছে ধীরে অনন্ত অম্বরে দিগন্ত অবগুণ্ঠনে ঢাকা তবু বিহঙ্গ ওরে বিহঙ্গ মোর অন্ধ বন্ধ করে না পাখা। আপনাদের ধন্যবাদ।
Dhanyabad Kabir Bhai. Thank you very much. I mean, you have brought many things that we really need to ponder upon. I mean, whether we are academics or civil society or politicians or even bureaucrats. To a great extent, you have highlighted the sovereignty of an individual. I mean, the free will and how we exercise our sovereignty. Democratic republic has to be people-centric, and obviously, when you have the private property as a guarantor of economic development, that has to come through an accountable institutions in which not only the public but also the institution has to be accountable. I think the future of liberal democracy, as you have mentioned, focuses on the dignity, equality, social justice, rule of law, for which if we don't have any alternative thinking, probably the whole spirit of liberal democracy might not kick off the way our forefathers envisaged. And obviously you have highlighted the issue of concentration of power. I often argue that there is a fear in many aspects of the society that if you go for decentralization, you will be deregulation. And certainly this is something we need to bring in and allow people to discuss on these things. And development without democracy, as Dr. Nazneen has mentioned, you have also echoed, and certainly this often sounds like a democracy without development without democracy is more like back in the Pakistan era, which history attests time to time. Thank you, Kabir Bhai, for your eloquent remarks. With that note, may I move towards Advocate Said Rizwana Hassan, very well known among the actors who makes decision, informed opinion, and she has been an instrumental in bringing climate justice, environmental justice in the country. And with that, may I request Advocate Hassan to focus on the rule of law, institutions, and how these initiatives can bring us towards an equitable environmental regime, which is essential for economic development and sustainability of civilization. Let us think in a very civilizational scale sometimes. Advocate Hassan.
Yes. Thank you very much, Hab. I actually wanted to be the next speaker because I'm attending another board meeting via another call. But I do have written down some points that I thought I should share with all of you. I think we have a democracy in the country in a moment where citizens or voters didn't have much role to play. So yes, it's a democracy. Yes, there were elections, but at least I myself did not cast my vote. There was no enthusiasm, and there were also practical obstacles for which many of us could not cast our vote. So I think it's important when we talk about rule of law that we hold on, because I've kept the mic of the other program on. So I just have to.
That's called multitasking, which you're famous for.
Yeah. So basically, when I look at my country now and I think about democracy and the democratic institutions, I definitely want to, evaluate the role of our election commission, our judiciary, our bureaucracy, the civil society, and the media. The election commission, how much confidence does it enjoy is one thing, and how it has been structured to deliver its objectives is also another thing that we can question. We have seen how the parliamentary election has been held. There was hardly any contest from the opposition parties. So it was, to me, a one-party election. Coming down to the local government election, we have seen how the process has deliberately been killed. So there were elections in 2010, 2011, where we saw some opposition leaders making it to the post, but then most of them were jailed. And then the local government institutions, when we talk about institutional functioning and rule of law, most of the local government institutions were actually run by administrators. Now, against these irregularities, where will the voters go to? They'll go to the judiciary. We need a state judiciary. Did we actually have it? Did we think of going to the judiciary, challenging the election process, where 15%, 25%, 30% voters only turned up? Bangladesh, I don't think in any accepted election had voter turn up less than 70%. But there were elections where 25%, 30% voters participated, yet people didn't think of challenging this before the judiciary. We don't know why. Bureaucracy, it's important to understand that they are public functionaries, state functionaries, and not necessarily government functionaries. In most cases, we see that the identity of state functionary and government functionary is getting mixed up. So the public servants often talk about spokesperson of given political parties. And this has started for last 20 years. And this merging of identity between the state and the government is also making it difficult for entities like civil society and media to criticize the government. Any criticism against the government, any harsh criticism against the government is often interpreted as criticism against the state, and legal actions are also being taken against that. Above all, we have this repressive, restrictive laws and the corporatization process of the civil society and the media. Even in social media, your freedom of expression is badly curtailed because of the monitoring. And if you see the recent leakage of the phone conversation of a journalist with her father, that is extremely frustrating. Even I can't share my thoughts with my father. I can't express myself in the social media. I can't express myself in the mainstream media. Politicians are not talking to us anymore, but we are living in a society where even my conversation with my father becomes a public issue, and nobody knows who has leaked it out. Nobody is talking about punishing those who have leaked it out. The thing is, it is public money that is being used for purchase of all these devices that would record your and my conversation. Do we really want public money to be used for these purposes? Is anyone questioning it? So there are institutions that have been targeted and in a very planned way, defamed. Their credibility in a very planned way has been brought down in the eyes of the people. But then there are actors, there are players who want to do it with credibility, but with enactment of repressive laws, they are also being harassed. So I would make just few recommendations. One is we need some changes in the Constitution. There was a provision of referendum on important issues. So I think if one wants to change the basic premises of the Constitution, no political party, whether they have 2/4, 3/4 majority, we don't care. If they want to bring in major changes in the basic principles of the Constitution, they have to arrange for referendum. So for example, the caretaker government, it may not be the basic premise, but it actually impacts the basic premise of the Constitution, which is democracy. So we had movement. Many of us participated in the movement, but then it got very technically scrapped from the Constitution without any sort of, public consultations. It was one party thought that led to this change. That must not happen. We must bring in that provision of referendum in the Constitution. Article 7 of the Constitution says that people are the center of all power. Now, one way of people exercising their power is through their voting rights. If that voting right is curtailed by amendment of the Constitution arbitrarily and by one power, that must not be accepted. Election process has to be very, very, very clearly laid down. If an election is participated only by 25% of the voters, will we still call it a valid election under the Constitution when all powers actually vest in the people and 75% of the people do not vote? I do not think so. So and given our rival and negative politics, the rivalry that we have in the politics and the negativity that we have in the politics, I think we have to ask for a system like caretaker government. Whether they call it caretaker or not, I don't care, but there has to be a process that will ensure that voters are encouraged to go and cast their vote. The second point is about local government. The Constitution actually wants all powers to be exercised through elected representative of the local governments. We have a lot to do there. The third point is about appointment of the judges. Even with judgment from the appellate division, the procedure has not been laid down. The law enforcing agencies, bureaucracy, and the judicial officers, whoever is appointed, whoever is recruited, they have to be partisan. This has to be made mandatory. The provision in the Constitution of having an ombudsperson has never been acted upon. This has to be acted upon. About budget, I must say that use of public money, use and allocation of public money must be done in a way that inequality is addressed. How much money do we need for the defense sector and why? How much money do we need for the health sector and why? Those things have to be questioned. And whenever they propose something in the budget, they have to debate, they have to ensure public debate so that more money goes to education and health and less to defense. So that we actually can address the issues of equality. All repressive laws must be scrapped. If you don't have a free civil society, a free media, you can't expect of having an election. I'll just take 2 minutes you have. So the other thing is about controlling the corporatization of the media. There has to be some safeguards in place. In every part of the world, you're having corporate media houses, but the safeguards are put in place very clearly. And that is why one corporate house will not be able to abuse another corporate house by using their media. So that those safeguards have to be brought into place. I do not know, but I actually feel like asking for a midterm election because I haven't casted vote for God knows how many years. I really want to cast my vote in an election where I would know who the other candidate is. I just get to know who the candidate of one party is. I hardly get to know who the candidate of other party is. And the process of democracy, the so-called unique model of democracy that we have, there is no chance of legalizing it. We must ask for regularizing our democracy through creating space for people to cast their vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rizwan Appa. I think you have covered quite a lot of technical issues as well. I mean, rule of law has been a feature of all the speakers today. You have brought in the role of the electoral institutions, particularly Election Commission and voters' participation, which means educating the voter is also an important factor. You have mentioned about the laws which are creating obstacle in public sovereignty or perhaps exercising their rights. And in many cases, we often see in the media that there is a leak of audio recording, which is a clear violation of privacy, whoever it is. And in that case, that also tells you that the scale of impunity sometimes that we get to see. Article 7 has been brought in, the people-centered political system, in which the voting right is one of the key issues, certainly. And you have proposed a number of amendments to the constitution to make it much more catered to the existing political and social realities in Bangladesh. The rivalry among the political parties also again raises the question that who could be a better intermediary in that case. Ombudsman was enacted earlier, but essentially didn't function the way it was envisaged. And again, the budgetary allocation has to be debated, in which the state should take lead in terms of facilitating better development agenda, whether it is public health, it is education, defense, gender, infrastructure, and so on and so on. And one of the very important point, which is the corporatization of media. I mean, in liberal democracy, the journalists must have a safeguard. The media houses must be able to function with absolute independence. And you have called for midterm election, which I think is also important in facilitating better democratic governance in the countries. Thank you, Rizwan Appa, for your comments. And I think these are extremely valuable. With that note, may I request our special guest, Mr. Amir Khusro Mahmood Chaudhry. He was former minister to the Bangladesh government, and he is currently the member of the National Standing Committee of Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Mr. Chaudhry, if you could grace us with your thoughts. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's weird that we have all learned to live. Thank you very much, Shahab, for the floor. I thank CGS for organizing, and their partners, of course, today's discussion. The time that we live in right now in Bangladesh, to have an objective, authentic, serious discussion, which is free, is very, very difficult now. Even though it is a very good endeavor and effort on CGS's part, the problem of the situation, actually, the problem lies somewhere else. The environment of Bangladesh is become so problematic. To have a free, fair, and authentic and objective discussion is very, very difficult. And when you have one, and perhaps even the presenter of the paper, I think, has to have in mind for self-censoring the paper. Or maybe at times we see the apologist has to do the paper, because otherwise you can be subject to so many problems. I'm in a problem, Shahab, and also Zillur, because before I go into the subject, actually I came prepared to talk about liberal democracy today. But I had the paper very late at night. I could not go through it, but listening to the presenter, I think before I go into the subject of liberal democracy, I have to clear the political air that has been clouded by some of the comments made in this paper. Because if I don't do that, I will not do justice to my party and to the people of Bangladesh, the democracy-loving people of Bangladesh. So I will perhaps require a little bit more time, because actually I didn't expect that I have to get into that area at all today. But since it is mentioned in the paper, so I need to clear the air for the sake of my political belief and for the sake of my party and for the political atmosphere of Bangladesh. You see, we have to put there is talk about undemocratic origin in the paper. And that said, the paper said so many things about the undemocratic origin. But we need to put the political genesis in proper perspective. We cannot, in order to do that, I have to first go back to, if I the formation of political parties that was mentioned in the paper and origin of the parties. There it was mentioned that the parties born through military leadership and all that was mentioned. But let me make it a bit clear. There are many, many military leaders who formed the political parties. And as a matter of, did a better service to the politics and democracy than many politicians. For BNP, I mean, President Ziaur Rahman has formed the political party. Let us be very honest about it. Who was President Zia? President Zia was he is the one who declared the independence of Bangladesh. He is the first to revolt against Pakistani soldiers, first to revolt. He fought the war of independence frontally. He was at the forefront of the war against Pakistan. He brought back multi-party democracy from one-party system. He made the media of Bangladesh free. Excuse me.
Ji, I got to start. Ji.
Okay. He came in not through military coup. He came in a vacuum after one party system collapsed and another party formed, and that was in disarray. And when the people of Bangladesh and the soldiers of Bangladesh together, through a popular uprising of soldiers and the people of Bangladesh, and he filled in the void that was created. And having taken the power, he gave the country back multi-party system. He gave back the media freedom, independent of judiciary. And there has been a lot of talk about referendum. Mr. Nurul Kabir and Rizwana also mentioned the referendum. It is the core of democracy. Because if you talk about liberal democracy, the liberalism tells you that it is the individual's choice that matters most. And for individual's choice to be respected, you have to go back to the individuals, you have to go back to your citizens. And that was scrapped. And that was scrapped from the Constitution, which President Ziaur Rahman brought back. He brought back all aspects of democratic rights in Bangladesh. I can go on because we don't have much time, because I want to talk about a little bit about liberal democracy. And when you talk about military leadership, I can give you a long list of military leadership who have done great service to democracy and to their countries, including George Washington, and many, many more. I can give you a long list. So don't be selective in your choice of democracy for the country, because this is something you create more division and stumbling block in the way of democracy. At the end of the day, it is a choice of the people. This party was formed by Ziaur Rahman, and it got so much popularity in the country that today we can't have a free and fair election, for that matter. Why do you think we can't have a free and fair election in Bangladesh? Because the outcome is well known to the ruling party. That's exactly why you can't have a free and fair election. So at the end of the day, you have to respect the choice of the people, the wishes of the people. That is what democracy is all about. That is the bedrock. That is the bedrock of democracy. So bringing in issues like how the party originated, if I have to go back, we have seen also many politicians who, the party which originated through political process, we have seen how they have destroyed the democracy, how they have killed the democracy, how they have killed the human rights in the country, in Bangladesh, how they have snatched all the basic rights of people of Bangladesh. Once you disenfranchise the citizens of the country through an unfair election, through a stolen election, you continue to disenfranchise every step of the way. And that is what we are seeing in Bangladesh right now. People are getting disenfranchised in every step of the way. Many speakers talked about judiciary and institutions and all that. This is all the proof of disenfranchisement in Bangladesh. And they are disenfranchised through capturing the institutions of the country. You see, any country that can think of a liberal democracy, the first thing to put in place is the proper institutions. And what we have in Bangladesh today, the capture of institutions and putting the core cronies in charge of those institutions. And executives are dictating all institutions of the country. Mr. Nurul Kabir said the power, so much power lies in the executive in Bangladesh today, that they are dictating all the institutions of the country. The three organs of the independent organs of the country is not functioning anymore. The legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. The executive organ of the country is dictating judiciary. They are bypassing the legislative through unfair elections, through rigged elections. And first thing we need to talk about is the election integrity of Bangladesh today. That is the bedrock of going forward for liberal democracy. It's no good saying, I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, we cannot achieve democracy through an electoral democracy only. I agree with that. But electoral democracy is the bedrock. And from there, the journey starts from there. If you do not have an electoral democracy, if you do not have electoral integrity, the journey will never start. And this is what we are missing in Bangladesh. And through an authoritarian regime, you have taken over all the institutions. None are allowed to function. Now the judiciary is the guardian of the constitution. And constitution is the guiding rules for the country. You cannot talk about, you see, the rules are put in place in a way. The Digital Security Act, I have seen some interpretation of Digital Security Act. Do we need any interpretation for Digital Security Act? Do we not know what Digital Security Act is doing to our country? Is there any interpretation needed for that? 1/3 of the Constitution is outside the purview of amendment. 1/3 of the Constitution. But you can't talk about Constitution. There's restrictions. You cannot criticize the Constitution. There are people who are off limits from discussion because you can't criticize them. No constitution in the world, nobody can be off limit. But would you have this? You have this anti-state issue of anti-state statements, sedition laws in place. I mean, what is the direction we are going? So I think really to be true, we should all talk about if you want to break out of this quagmire, we need to talk about first thing, how to break out with a free and fair election. Nothing else. All other things that we are talking about, it's like putting the horse before the cart, you see. It's not on. Because unless you can have an electoral integrity in Bangladesh, and that is not possible without a neutral body overseeing the election process. when somebody says that caretaker government is not on and it is anti-democratic, how do you break out of this quagmire? And one should remember, this caretaker government came into being through national consensus. BNP was in power, there was a big demand, and then there was a big demand from people across the board, and there was a consensus, and we had the caretaker government. And that was done away unilaterally. And the court is firing on the shoulder of the court. We all know that. It's no good hiding behind the court. We know why this caretaker government had to be done away with. You can't hide away behind the court. We all know the reason. The committee that was constituted on the caretaker government reported almost unanimously in favor of caretaker government to the Prime Minister. That was clear, it was public. So what went wrong? Because things had to be changed in their own way. And that is what we have faced it today. Let's face it. We have to have an electoral integrity. We must have electoral integrity. We must have a neutral body to oversee this election process. We must put our institutions in place, which have been captured and made to be subject to executive directives day in, day out, must come out of this quagmire. You see, talking about the press, the media, I know there's been talk about the corporatization, and I don't disagree with all that. But the bottom line is, the way media is watched, monitored, do we not know it? It's no good saying that because they're corporatized, because they're underfunded. No. We know the medias who are not underfunded, who are financially very solvent, who are the most popular media in the country. What they're facing, we know that. They're running from pillar to post, post to pillar, day in, day out. And they don't, when they pick up their pen, they don't know where to start. Because Damocles' sword is hanging over your head. That's reality. It is the Damocles' sword hanging over your head, not just the journalists. It is hanging over the heads of the judges. It is hanging over the heads of the civil society. It is, of course, hanging over the heads of politicians and any dissenters. So, do I have some more time or not?
Unfortunately.
No, because I have to, sorry, Shahab, I have to clear the air. I mean, it's no point. I have to clear the air, and the subject, the paper that has been presented, I'm sorry that as I said, I mean, it is sometimes self-censored, or an apologist has to submit a paper. I don't know which one is this paper. I'm sorry. So this is what we have faced. I'm not blaming anybody. And I have so much respect for CGS and Zillur that I thought I must come and just make the air clear. I was not going to come, honestly. Going through the paper, little bit, browsing through the paper, I decided maybe it's no point in me coming here because it is, again, so apologist a paper. It is, or it's self-censored. It's no point wasting my time coming here talking about things that will not come to anything at the end of the day.
I think so. Your voice is very much needed. I mean, this whole platform is a reflection that we are trying humbly to bring liberal democracy back home. So sir, I think your remarks are remarkably important for everyone to hear, and I'm quite sure Professor Majumdar has taken.
I'll finish anyway. I think I'll finish. I'll not take too much time, but. I think I was actually I would have been quite happy to discuss the topics such as trajectory of authoritarianism in Bangladesh, Something like that would have been interesting, you see. Or a trajectory of autocracy would have been a very good discussion point right now under the environment that we are living in. But to have to discuss a subject like liberal democracy, where there is no semblance of democracy, where there is no security of life, honestly, there's no security of life. People are threatened day in, day out with the insecurity of their life. And you're talking about liberal democracy, the future of liberal democracy in Bangladesh. For God's sake, let us wake up and smell the coffee. You'll not get anywhere like this. Let us come up with the issues that we are able to truly, the country needs to discuss. Liberal democracy gives me a lot of hope. I am a Democrat. I'm an internationalist. And I believe in human values, individualism. I believe in collective choices. I believe in constitutionalism. I believe in pluralism. We all do. But the way forward is to leave it to the owners of the country. At the end of the day, the verdict has to come from them. Nothing else will work in Bangladesh. The verdict has to come from the owners of the country. You cannot hijack the verdict of the country, of the people of the country. And you cannot hijack and continue to rule through misrule, misgovernance, misinformation, and capturing the institutions of the country. That can go only so far. I think I can go on forever. Sorry, thank you. I think I'll finish here. I'll end here.
I think, sir, I'm not going to summarize your remark because it's so rich and it's so deep.
You won't be able to do it because there's so much self-censorship and apologists are talking everywhere. Sorry, I know you can't. You have your restriction as well. But it's a good effort. It's a good initiative. At least I could speak my mind. I got off my chest a lot of things today. Thank you very much.
I think that is our greatest achievement, that you have got many things out of your chest. Sir, I think you have brought in choice, you have brought in institutions, you have brought in the decentralization of power, and most importantly, the idea of disenfranchisement. This is, I think, one of the core issues that the post-COVIDian world will be facing. And obviously, sir, I couldn't agree more that the democracy as the sword. This is the ultimate sword. It sits over everyone. I mean, every individual or the dissenters in this country. And obviously, sir, I think—
One more thing, Shahab, I think, you see, we have become so habituated to some selective politics. That politics that favors me, that suits me, you see. Democratically elected undemocratic people. What does that mean? So you are disrespecting the verdict of the citizens, their choices. What are you talking about? Leave it to the citizens. This is a process. It's a clearinghouse. It's a clearinghouse. Democracy is a clearinghouse. Election is a clearinghouse. It continues to clear the issues and the people as well. Leave it to them.
Excellent.
Don't be so selective that favors your politics, that the origin of a party and democratically elected undemocratic people. People can throw the same thing at you.
Sure.
And I could have gone on about Bakshal and one party system. That was the origin. That was the origin of undemocratic Bangladesh. Let me put it very clear. That was the origin of undemocratic Bangladesh. So when you talk about undemocratic origin, let us start with Bakshal. Then you can have a discussion. But if you go in another direction, then we don't have a discussion here.
Sir, I think this is very important. I mean, I would leave it with our honorable chief guest to also address the issue of selectiveness, because selectiveness contradicts the dignity, human dignity at the end of the day, and the democratic values. So thank you very much. I think we have plenty of things to debate and talk, and I think CGS will be forthcoming in future to, again, keep your chest clean, sir, if you agree to that. Thank you, sir, once again. May I move, sir, if you allow me?
No, please go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry. I think I have taken up a little bit more time. Sorry, as I said, I mean, I came ready to discuss the future of liberal democracy. But when I confronted these issues, which I need to make clear, you see.
Thank you, sir. May I request our chief guest, Honorable Minister for Ministry of Railways, Mr. Mohammad Nurul Islam Sujan, to
আমার বক্তব্য কখন আছে?
Of course, that's here, Nazma. How can we can't allow you to speak? So after Shujan Bhai, you are the one who will speak. Honorable Chief Guest. I don't see Honorable Chief Guest over here.
He's with us. So.
Unmute, sir. Unmute yourself.
I can't see.
Yes, he's with us.
দিলুর ভাই একটু আনমিউট করে দিবেন স্যারকে?
I have sent a request.
You have muted my video.
Honorable Minister, you need to unmute yourself.
এখন শোনা যাচ্ছে?
Yes.
শোনা যাচ্ছে, জি।
ধন্যবাদ
Yes, we can hear you.
ধন্যবাদ চেয়ারম্যানকে যে এই ধরনের একটা ডিসকাশন আয়োজন করার জন্য, এবং যারা পার্টিসিপেন্ট তারা অত্যন্ত দেশের প্রথিতযশা বুদ্ধিজীবী হিসেবে তারা পরিচিত, স্ব ক্ষেত্রে তারা প্রত্যেকেই জাতীয়ভাবে তারা পরিচিত, এবং যে লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসি সম্বন্ধে শান্তনু মজুমদারের যে পেপার, এটি আসলে গতকাল রাত্রে আমি পেয়েছি। আমিও সম্পূর্ণভাবে এই পেপারটি দেখার সুযোগ আমার হয়নি, তবে এই আলোচকদের আলোচনার মাধ্যমে যেটুকু বুঝতে পেরেছি সেটি হলো যে উদার নৈতিক গণতন্ত্রের ভবিষ্যৎ এই কোভিডের পরে কি হবে, এবং যদি আমরা আলোচনা করতে চাই তাহলে আমাদের একটু পিছনের দিকে যেতে হবে, যে আমরা বাংলাদেশের যে অর্জন, এই অর্জন কোন প্রক্রিয়ার মধ্য দিয়ে আজকে আমরা বাংলাদেশ অর্জন করেছি। আমাদের ৭০ সালের নির্বাচন, পরবর্তীকালে মুক্তিযুদ্ধের মধ্য দিয়ে আমরা যে সংবিধান পেলাম, যেটি আমির খসরু মাহমুদ বাকশালের কথা টেনে এনে ডেমোক্রেসি সেখান থেকে বাধাগ্রস্ত হয়েছে। আপনার দেশ স্বাধীনের পরের পরিস্থিতিগুলো আপনারা অনুধাবন করবেন। আমাদের গণতন্ত্রের মূল লক্ষ্যই ছিল, জাতির জনক বঙ্গবন্ধুর রাজনীতির মূল লক্ষ্যই ছিল, এবং বাংলাদেশের সমস্ত মানুষকে মুক্তিযুদ্ধে আজকে অংশগ্রহণের মূল লক্ষ্যই ছিল যে গরিব দুঃখী মেহনত মানুষের মুখে হাসি ফোটানো, বাংলাদেশকে আত্মনির্ভরশীল মর্যাদাবদ্ধ দেশ হিসাবে পৃথিবীর বুকে প্রতিষ্ঠিত করা। ১ কোটি মানুষ ভারতে গিয়ে আশ্রয় গ্রহণ করেছিল। ভারতীয় সেনাবাহিনী মাত্র ৩ মাসের মধ্যে বাংলাদেশের থেকে আপনার চলে গিয়েছিল। এখানে আন্দোলন এবং গণতন্ত্রের জন্য আন্দোলন, সংগ্রামের জন্য আন্দোলন এবং বিপ্লবী আপনার সমাজতন্ত্র, বৈপ্লবিক সমাজতন্ত্র, এই বৈপ্লবিক সমাজতন্ত্রের পিছনে স্বাধীনতা বিরোধী যে শক্তি, যারা আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধে বিরোধিতা করেছিল, যে সংবিধানে আমাদের ধর্মকে ব্যবহার করা যাবে না, যে গণতন্ত্রের আমরা যদি সেটি আলোচনা করি, তাহলে আমাদের গণতন্ত্র এবং রাজনীতিতে ধর্মকে ব্যবহার করার যে এই যে সেপারেশন, যেটা এটি আবার আমরা মিশ্রণ করে ফেললাম। কি প্রক্রিয়ায় আপনার 1975 সালে 15 আগস্ট বঙ্গবন্ধুকে হত্যা করা হলো, আপনার বাকশালের যে কর্মসূচি কি জন্য গ্রহণ করা হলো, কি পরিস্থিতি ছিল সেই সময়, পাটের গুদামে আগুন দেওয়া, রেল লাইন তুলে ফেলা, এই যে একটি আপনার একটি সন্ত্রাসী এই যে পরিবেশ, এই পরিবেশকে থেকে, এবং বঙ্গবন্ধু যিনি বলেছিলেন যে আমার স্বাধীনতা ব্যর্থ হবে যদি আমার অর্থনৈতিকভাবে যদি মানুষের মুক্তি আমি না আনতে পারি। তাহলে অর্থনৈতিক মুক্তিটি কিন্তু স্বাধীনতার যে মূল লক্ষ্য, সেটা ছিল অর্থনৈতিক মুক্তি। সেই অর্থনৈতিক মুক্তি আনতে গিয়ে বঙ্গবন্ধু পরবর্তীকালে বাকশালের যে প্রতিষ্ঠা করেছিলেন, সেখানেও আমরা দেখেছি যে সমস্ত রাজনৈতিক দলের অংশগ্রহণ আমরা দেখেছি। কিন্তু 1975 সালে কি প্রকারে বঙ্গবন্ধুকে হত্যা করা হয়েছে, এবং হত্যা যারা করলো তাদেরকে ইন্ডেমনিটি দেওয়া হলো। শুধু প্রেসিডেন্ট খন্দকার মোস্তাক আসলো, জিয়াউর রহমান যে প্রেসিডেন্ট হলেন কিভাবে, কোন সাংবিধানিক প্রক্রিয়া, এবং যে এটা বলছেন যে আপনার আমাদের যে রেফারেন্ডাম, এই যে রেফারেন্ডাম কিভাবে হয়েছে, কত পার্সেন্ট লোক ভোট দিয়েছে, হানা ভোট আমরা দেখেছি, আমরাও তো ছিলাম। আমি জানি না আমির খসরু মাহমুদ সাহেব জিয়াউর রহমানের রাজনীতির সঙ্গে কবে যুক্ত হয়েছিলেন, কিন্তু আমরা দেখেছি 79-এর নির্বাচন আসলো, সেই নির্বাচন আমরা দেখেছি। আমার বড় ভাই সে সময় 39 জন মাত্র আওয়ামী লীগ থেকে নির্বাচিত হয়েছিল, তারা একজন ছিলেন। কিভাবে সে ভোট হয়েছে আমরা দেখেছি, হানা ভোট হয়েছে। আপনার জিয়াউর রহমান এবং আপনার ওসমানীর ভোট হয়েছে, আমরা প্রেসিডেন্সিয়াল ভোট দেখেছি। বাধ্য করা হয়েছে গ্রামের একটা স্কুলের মাস্টার থেকে শুরু করে একদম ইউনিয়ন পরিষদের চেয়ারম্যান, মেম্বার, এই যে আজকে ভোটের কথাও আসছে, এই যে আজকে আপনার জনগণের ভোটিং রাইট, এই রাইটের কথা যেটা আজকে আলোচনা হলো, বড় গলায় আমরা আলোচনা করছি, সেটিকে কে ধ্বংস করেছে? এবং আপনার 79-এর ভোট পরবর্তীকালে জিয়াউর রহমান আসার পরে এরশাদের যে আবার একই প্রক্রিয়ায় এই যারা বঙ্গবন্ধুকে খুনি তাদেরকে আপনার ইন্ডেমনিটি দেওয়া, তাদেরকে বিদেশে দিয়ে আপনার তাদেরকে আশ্রয় দেওয়া, তাদেরকে চাকরি দেওয়া, এই কাজগুলি কারা করেছে? তাদেরকে আজকে সেই কারণে আমরা অনেক চড়াই উতরাই পার করে আজকে আমরা যে জায়গায় এসেছি, আজকে আমরা বলছি যে ডেমোক্রেসি, আজকে লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসির কথা আমরা বলছি। আজকে যে সম্পূর্ণভাবে যেটিকে ডিনাই করা হচ্ছে, যে 14 সালে ভোট কিভাবে হয়েছিল, পার্টিসিপেট করা হলো না, 400 থেকে 500 আপনার পুড়িয়ে দেওয়া হলো, এবং যাতে কোনোভাবে ভোট কেউ দিতে না পারে। 13 সাল এবং 14 সাল এই যে মানুষ জ্বালিয়ে দেওয়া, পুড়িয়ে দেওয়া, এই ঘটনাগুলির মধ্য দিয়ে একটি সন্ত্রাসী কর্মকাণ্ডের মধ্য দিয়ে এই যে আমাদের আজকে ডেমোক্রেটিক ধারা আমাদের অগ্রসর হচ্ছে। তাহলে আজকে আলোচনার যে আমরা এটা দেখেছি, আপনার শান্তনু মজুমদারের যে পেপার, সেখানে আমরা যেটা দেখলাম, সেখানে এই সন্ত্রাসের বিষয়গুলি সেভাবে উঠে আসে নাই। ধারাবাহিকভাবে আমাদের এখানে যুক্ত হয়েছে, ধর্মকে সম্পৃক্ত করা হয়েছে, সন্ত্রাসকে বাদ দেওয়া হয়েছে, সন্ত্রাসের বিষয়গুলো আসে নাই। এবং আজকে অনেকগুলো বিষয় এই আলোচনার মধ্যে এসছে। আমি 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 মনে করি যে আজকে জাতির জনক বঙ্গবন্ধু কোন আজকের যে সরকার আসার পরে যে আমাদের সংবিধানকে, যেটা পাকিস্তানের ধারণায় সেটা আপনার সেভাবে প্রতিষ্ঠা করার জন্য একটা প্রসেস হয়েছিল, অর্থাৎ এই যে আজকে আপনার ধর্মভিত্তিক যে রাজনীতি, জামাতে ইসলাম, তাদের কিভাবে এখানে অনুপ্রবেশ ঘটলো, এগুলো কিভাবে তৈরি করে দিল? যারা আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধে বিরোধীরা করেছিল, যে রাজাকার আলবদর যাদের বিচার হচ্ছিল, তাদেরকে একদিনে জিয়াউর রহমান আপনার এক ফরওয়ার্ডের মাধ্যমে সবাইকে মুক্ত করে দিল। যারা খুনি ছিল, যাদের বিরুদ্ধে অপরাধ আপনার সুনির্দিষ্ট অপরাধ ছিল মুক্তিযুদ্ধের মধ্যে, এই কাজগুলি করার মধ্য দিয়ে, এবং আজকে আমি মনে করি যে একটা লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসির যে প্রশ্নগুলি আসছে, আমাদের অবশ্যই আমরা সব দিক থেকে যে আমাদের এখন পর্যন্ত অর্জন আমরা করেছি, এর দাবি করলে সঠিক হবে না, কিন্তু এর জন্য একটা দায়িত্বশীল বিরোধী দল, সেই বিরোধী দলের প্রয়োজন আছে। অথচ আমাদের দেশের যে বিরোধী দল, তারা কেবলমাত্র দায়িত্বের বেলায় তারা নেই। আজকে সন্ত্রাস এবং এই জঙ্গিবাদ থেকে শুরু করে যত সন্ত্রাসী কর্মকাণ্ড আছে, তার মদতদাতাই হলো আমাদের বর্তমান প্রধান বিরোধী দল। কাজে আজকে মুক্তিযুদ্ধ বিরোধী শক্তি এখন পর্যন্ত মুক্তিযুদ্ধের মধ্য দিয়ে যে অর্জনগুলি, এই অর্জনগুলিকে স্বীকার, যেগুলো মীমাংসিত মুক্তিযুদ্ধের মধ্য দিয়ে, সেই মীমাংসিত বিষয়গুলো আজকে অনেকেই সেগুলো গ্রহণ করছে না। আজকে তারা বিশ্বাস করছে না। আজকে আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধ নিয়েই আজকে বিতর্ক তৈরি করা হয়েছে। এই যে বলছে যে জিয়াউর রহমান ঘোষণার মধ্য দিয়েই আপনার প্রথম ঘোষণা দিয়েছে, এটা যদি আমরা আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধের ইতিহাস যদি পড়ে দেখি, ধীরে 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 সেই 69-এর আপনার আন্দোলন, 70-এর নির্বাচন, এবং একটা নির্বাচিত একটা প্রতিনিধিত্বশীল সরকার, সেটাকে অস্বীকার করবে কিভাবে? এটা যে কেউ বললে হবে? একটা নির্বাচিত, সেখানে আমাদের নির্বাচিত সরকার আছে, সেখানে বঙ্গবন্ধু নির্বাচিত প্রতিনিধি ছিলেন, একমাত্র এই ঘোষণা একমাত্র বঙ্গবন্ধু ছাড়া আর কারো দেওয়ার কোনো অধিকার ছিল না। অথচ আমরা বঙ্গবন্ধুর পাশাপাশি জিয়াউর রহমানকে সামনে এনে মুক্তিযুদ্ধের ঘোষক হিসাবে আমরা আরেকজনকে পাশাপাশি দাঁড় করিয়ে আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধকে আমরা মূলত বিতর্কিত করার চেষ্টা করছি। কাজেই আজকে যদি আমি বলবো, এটুকুই শুধু আহ্বান থাকবে এবং আলোচনার মধ্য দিয়ে, সেটি হলো যে আমাদের যদি লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসিকে যদি আমাদের শক্তিশালী করতে হয়, আমাদের প্রত্যেকেই স্ব জায়গার থেকে যে দায়িত্বগুলো, আমরা বুদ্ধিজীবী হই, সাংবাদিক হই, আমরা রাজনীতিবিদ হই, আমরা যে যেখানে আছি, আমরা যদি সত্যিকার ভাবে দায়িত্বশীল ভূমিকা পালন করি, তাহলেই আমার বিশ্বাস যে আমাদের যে লক্ষ্য নিয়ে আজকে যে আলোচনা, এই আলোচনা ফলপ্রসূ হবে, আমাদের দেশে সমৃদ্ধি আসবে, আপনার ডেমোক্রেটিক যে প্রসেস আরো শক্তিশালী হবে, আমাদের বিচার ব্যবস্থা শক্তিশালী হবে, আমাদের যে গণতান্ত্রিক অধিকারগুলোর কথা যেটা বলছি, যেগুলো আজকে বাধাগ্রস্ত হচ্ছে, এগুলি কোনো কিছুই আর এই অভিযোগগুলি থাকবে না। আমি সর্বশেষে শুধু এটুকু বলবো যে আজকে দেশ সামনের দিকে কিন্তু অনেক দূরে এগিয়ে গেছে, অর্থনৈতিক ভাবে এগিয়ে গেছে, আমাদের অর্জন আছে। এই অর্জনের বিষয়গুলো অবশ্যই আমাদের আলোচনায় নিয়ে আসতে হবে। যে আলোচনাগুলো আজকে আমরা এখানে নিয়ে এসেছি, সেটি হলো আমাদের নেগেটিভ যে সাইডটি, সেটি আমরা নিয়ে এসেছি। কিন্তু আমি আলোচকদের দৃষ্টি আকর্ষণ করব, যাতে এই বর্তমান অবস্থায়ও এই লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসির যে আলোচনা, এই আলোচনার মধ্য দিয়ে আমাদের সরকার কিংবা দেশের যে অগ্রগতি এবং যে উন্নয়ন, সেই বিষয়গুলোকে যদি আমরা পাশাপাশি নিয়ে আসতে পারি, তাহলে সত্যিকার ভাবে আমাদের কোথায় আমাদের ঘাটতি, কোন জায়গায় আমাদের ঘাটতি, সেই ঘাটতিগুলোকে আমরা চিহ্নিত করতে পারবো, এবং আমরা সঠিকভাবে আমরা দেশকে একটি গণতান্ত্রিক ব্যবস্থার মধ্য দিয়ে আমরা এগিয়ে নিতে পারবো। এই কথা বলে আমি আমার বক্তব্য শেষ করছি। আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ।
ধন্যবাদ মাননীয় মন্ত্রী। আপনি যদি অনুমতি দেন তাহলে একটু আমি ইংরেজিতে সামারাইজ করে দিচ্ছি আপনার বক্তব্যটি। First of all, the Honorable Minister has highlighted the historical genesis of Bangladesh's politics. And it has never been a smooth ride, rather this is a bumpy ride in which we have seen tragic events unfolding. We have seen that the whole democratic process were obstructed due to many reasons. One of the reasons is the non-democratic forces coming into the electoral system, in the political system, which obstructed the growth of democratic institutions. The minister has also talked about the necessity to address the achievements of the government so that we can make a balance between the gaps and the needs, and the government can understand even better that despite the development, if there are the gaps and needs that is needed to be addressed. The minister has highlighted that the issues of self-censorship and the lack of growth in the development process or the political process, but also he would like to really think about terrorism too, which the paper has not addressed aptly. So therefore, his views on the terrorism politics nexus, terrorism anti-state politics nexus has to be discussed in public widely. He has mentioned that the spirit of 1971 is still unfinished, but we are moving towards that, for which we also appreciate the initiatives that the government has undertaken, and certainly moving towards the development goals laid in our visions for 2021, 2041. With that note, Honorable Minister, I would request the participants to raise their comments or perhaps to express their observation. And in that case, for the sake of time, I would not be able to allow more than 3 to 5 minutes at best. So I have 3 eminent speakers to convey their observations. The first is Nazneen Ahmed, a very veteran politician, well known across the country. Then Professor Amina Mohsin, much revered, much wisdomful professor in international relations. I had the privilege of being taught by her. And then, of course, Abdul Majid, who is eminent civil servant and has significantly contributed to Bangladesh's financial regimes. Nazneen Ahmed, with you. Starting with you. Nazneen Ahmed? Unmute yourself, Nazneen Ahmed.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, every panel speakers or the think tank of our society. I want to thank the organizer who invite me in this one-line discussion, the future of liberal democracy in Bangladesh after COVID-19 pandemic. A special thanks, one of the main organizers, Mr. Jilur Rahman, and the moderator, Mr. Shahab Enam Khan. I want to thank the keynote speaker, Mr. Majumdar. I believe the father of the liberal democracy is the father of our nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. আমরা যদি আমি বাংলাতে বলছি, আমরা যদি সংবিধানের কথা আমরা দেখি বা সংবিধানকে দেখি বা বিশ্লেষণ করি, সে মহান মুক্তিযুদ্ধের মাধ্যমে অর্জিত যে সংবিধান 1972 সালে জাতির পিতা বঙ্গবন্ধু প্রণয়ন করেছিলেন, সেই সংবিধানের যে মেইন স্পিরিটগুলি, যে পিলারগুলি ছিল, সেগুলি ছিল আমাদের জন্য আমাদের লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসির যে চমৎকার পিলার, যেগুলি যদি আমরা এক্সারসাইজ করতাম এবং সেগুলিকে যদি আমরা ধারণ করে আমরা এগোতাম, তাহলে বাংলাদেশে আজকে যে কনফ্লিক্ট দেখা দিচ্ছে, যে আমরা যদি মনে করি যে জনাব আমির খসরু মাহমুদ যে কথা বলেছেন বা ডক্টর রেজাউনা যে কথাগুলি বলেছেন, যে ল্যাক অফ ডেমোক্রেসি অথবা যে দুর্নীতি কিংবা আইনের শাসনের কথা যেগুলি বলেছে, সেগুলি হয়তো আর বলার আমাদের কোনো সুযোগ থাকতো না। তারপর আমরা মনে করি যে এই যে আপনার লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসিকে যে হত্যা করা হলো 75 সালের 15 আগস্টের মধ্য দিয়ে, এটা কারা করেছিলেন? এটা আমাদের পশ্চিম পাকিস্তান থেকে যে আর্মি অফিসাররা বাংলাদেশে এসেছিলেন, তারা আনকোট এবং আনকোট বলছি, তারা স্বাধীনতা যুদ্ধ করার নামে তারা যে পাকিস্তানের অনুচর হয়ে বাংলাদেশে যুদ্ধ করেছিলেন, অংশগ্রহণ করেছিলেন, সেই অনুচরের একজনই ছিলেন, তো আমরা জানি এখন এটা প্রমাণিত, এখন বিভিন্ন আমরা বিভিন্ন সূত্র বা বিভিন্ন তথ্য থেকে এটা প্রমাণিত যে সে অনুচরের মধ্যে জিয়াউর রহমান ছিলেন অন্যতম, এবং বঙ্গবন্ধুকে যারা হত্যা করেছেন সেই জিয়াউর রহমানকে সহযোগী যদি আমরা ধরি বা তাকে যদি হত্যাকাণ্ডের মাস্টার মাইন্ড ধরি, তাহলে তার সঙ্গে যারা মেজর আলিম রশিদ যারা হত্যা করেছিলেন জাতির পিতাকে সপরিবারে, তারা কিন্তু সবাই পাকিস্তান ফেরত আর্মি ছিলেন, এবং তারা কোড এবং আনকোড তারা তথাকথিত মুক্তিযোদ্ধা ছিলেন, তারাই কিন্তু হত্যা করেছেন। আমাদের মুক্তিযুদ্ধের মাধ্যমে অর্জিত যেই সংবিধানকে বঙ্গবন্ধু হত্যাকাণ্ডের মধ্য দিয়ে যে সংবিধানকে হত্যা করা হলো, সংবিধানের মৌলিক বিধানগুলি চেঞ্জ করা হলো, সেখানে ধর্মের বিষয়গুলি সংবিধানের মধ্যে সন্নিবেশিত করা হলো। আমি কি বলতে পারি যে মৌলবাদ এবং গণতন্ত্র একসঙ্গে চলতে পারে? আমরা তো সেটা বলতে পারি না। যেমন আমরা বলতে পারি না দুর্নীতি এবং গণতন্ত্র একসাথে চলতে পারে না। তো মৌলবাদের প্রবর্তক কে ছিলেন? বিএনপি হয়তো বলবে যে বহুদলীয় গণতন্ত্রের প্রবক্তা ছিলেন জিয়াউর রহমান। তাহলে মৌলবাদের রাজনীতির প্রবক্তা কে ছিলেন বাংলাদেশে? জিয়াউর রহমান ছিলেন। জিয়াউর রহমান মৌলবাদী রাজনীতি সকল পথ উনি মুক্ত করেছিলেন। স্বাধীনতার বিরোধীকারীদেরকে উনি রাজনীতি করার সুযোগ করেছেন, এবং ওই সময়ে জামাত ইসলাম, নিজাম ইসলাম সহ যে সকল ধর্মীয় রাজনৈতিক দলগুলি যারা মুক্তিযুদ্ধে অংশগ্রহণ করেনি বরঞ্চ বিরোধিতা করেছে, আমাদের 30 লক্ষ মানুষকে শহীদ করার ক্ষেত্রে যারা সহযোগিতা করেছে, তাদেরকে জিয়াউর রহমান কিন্তু রাজনীতি করার সুযোগটা করে দিয়েছিলেন। পাশাপাশি উনি বাংলাদেশে যে পাকিস্তানি ভাবধারার রাজনীতি সেটা চালু করেছিলেন। সবচেয়ে অন্যায় করেছিলেন উনি, জাতির পিতা হত্যাকাণ্ডের বিচার করা যাবে না, এই যে সংসদে যে বিল উনি পাশ করেছিলেন। উনি তো জিয়াউর রহমান ছিলেন একজন সামরিক, তখন ছিলেন উনি সেনাপ্রধান এবং সরকারি কর্মকর্তা হিসাবে একটি দল গঠন করেছিলেন। পৃথিবীর গণতন্ত্রের কোন ইতিহাসে এটি আছে যে একজন সামরিক বাহিনীর প্রধান কিংবা একজন সরকারি কর্মকর্তা ওই পদে থাকা অবস্থায় তিনি দল গঠন করেছিলেন? প্রথমে জাগো পার্টি, পরে উনি বিএনপি ফর্ম করলেন 78 সালে। এই যে দল গঠন করলেন, উনি কাদেরকে নিয়ে দল করেছিলেন? মোর্চা করেছিলেন। গণতন্ত্র বিকশিত হবে কিভাবে? আপনি 50 বছরের স্বাধীনতার সুবর্ণ জয়ন্তী আমরা পালন করছি, তার মধ্যে 30 বছরই তো ছিল এই যে বিভিন্ন সামরিক হস্তক্ষেপ, সামরিক শাসক বা অন্যান্য গণতন্ত্রের নামে সামরিক লেবাসদারি রাজনৈতিক দল, কিংবা আমাদের স্বাধীনতার মূল্যবোধের চেতনার পরিপন্থী যে রাজনৈতিক দল, সে বিএনপি জামাত, তারাই তো ক্ষমতায় ছিল 30 বছরের। আপনি যদি 50 বছরে 30 বছরই তো এরা ক্ষমতায় ছিল। তো সুতরাং এই 30 বছরের যে ল্যাক অফ ডেমোক্রেসি ছিল, যেখানে গণতন্ত্রের চর্চা ছিল না, বরঞ্চ পিছিয়ে দেওয়ার, রাষ্ট্রকে পিছিয়ে দেওয়ার যে অনৈতিক কর্মকাণ্ড চলেছিল, ইতিহাসকে বিকৃত করার যে অনৈতিক কর্মকাণ্ড তারা স্টাবলিশ করেছিলেন, সেইখান থেকে এবং সংবিধানের পরিবর্তন করে, যেখানে ধর্মের ভিত্তিতে সংবিধান রচিত তারা করেছিলেন, সংবিধান সংশোধন করে, সেইগুলি ফলে মানুষের মনোজগতে কিন্তু আমাদের মৌলবাদী চেতনার একটা পরিবর্তন কিন্তু মানুষের মনোজগতের মধ্যে ঢুকে গিয়েছিল। এই মনোজগৎ থেকে বেরিয়ে এসে গণতান্ত্রিক উপায়ে যারা রাষ্ট্র পরিচালনা করেন কিংবা নির্বাচন করেন, সেই গণতান্ত্রিক নির্বাচন প্রক্রিয়াকে সমর্থন করে সেখানে কাজ করার জন্য, গণতন্ত্রকে বিকশিত করার জন্য তারা কিন্তু কেউ ওইভাবে উদ্যোগী হননি। ক্ষমতায় যেতে চান, হ্যাঁ, নির্বাচন হচ্ছে সংবিধান সম্মত উপায়ে ক্ষমতা যাওয়ার একটা উপায়। সেই সংবিধান সম্মতভাবে ক্ষমতা যাওয়ার উপায়কে যারা মানেন না, সংবিধান মানেন না, তারা আবার বলেন গণতন্ত্র আনতে হবে, গণতন্ত্র দিতে হবে। এখন আমাকে গণতন্ত্র মানলে তো সংবিধান মানতে হবে। সংবিধান মানলে গণতান্ত্রিক উপায়ে যে সংবিধানের মধ্য থেকে যে নির্বাচন হয়, সেই নির্বাচনে অংশগ্রহণ করতে হবে। সেই নির্বাচনের যে পিলার গুলিকে স্ট্রং করতে হবে। একটি রাজনৈতিক দলের আভ্যন্তরীণ তো গণতন্ত্রের চর্চা থাকতে হবে। একটি রাজনৈতিক দল যখন ক্ষমতায় যায়, তখন সংসদে গিয়েও তো সেই গণতান্ত্রিক চর্চাটা অব্যাহত রাখতে হবে। সংসদীয় কমিটি গঠন করতে হবে, সংসদে উপস্থিত থাকতে হবে। তাহলে সেই ধারাবাহিকতাগুলি কি বিএনপি যখন ক্ষমতায় ছিল তারা তো পালন করেনি। তো সুতরাং তখন দেখা যায় তখনকার সংসদ নেতা, তখনকার প্রধানমন্ত্রী বেগম খালেদা জিয়া মাত্র 7% সময় সংসদে উপস্থিত ছিলেন। তো এই যে একজন সংসদ নেতা, তার ক্ষমতার থাকাকালীন সময়ে যে উনি 7 কিংবা 8% সময় ক্ষমতায় থেকে, তাহলে উনি কিভাবে আপনি গণতন্ত্রের পথ বিকশিত করবেন কিংবা গণতান্ত্রিক চর্চাটা কিভাবে করবেন? যে রাজনৈতিক বলে গণতন্ত্রের দলের মধ্যেও নেই, সরকার পরিচালনা করবে তখন নাই। আমার কথা হচ্ছে এখানে আমরা বলেছি বাকশালের উদাহরণ এসেছে। হ্যাঁ, এখন বিএনপি বলতে যাচ্ছে যে COVID-19 মোকাবেলা করার জন্য আসেন আমরা সবাই একত্রিত হই। এই কথা বলাতে দোষ নেই, কিন্তু একটা যুদ্ধবিধ্বস্ত দেশকে পুনর্গঠিত করার জন্য যখন বঙ্গবন্ধু সব দলকে, রাজনৈতিক দলকে একই প্ল্যাটফর্মে এনে একটি কর্মসূচি ঘোষণা করেছিলেন সাময়িক সময়ের জন্য, সেটির দোষ। সেটি হচ্ছে মানে আপনার ভুল ভ্রান্তি কিংবা আমাদেরকে কটাক্ষ করে বলা হয় বাকশাল। তো এই বাকশালের এই কর্মসূচিটি ছিল যে তখনকার সময়ের জন্য অত্যন্ত যুগোপযোগী একটি কর্মসূচি, সেটি বোধহয় এখন বলার সময় এসেছে। সুতরাং আমি মনে করি আমার কি সময় আছে?
থ্যাংক ইউ।
সময় নাই, ঠিক আছে, আমি সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। অনেকে বলেছেন আমি শিখেছি, আমি মনে করি যে হ্যাঁ নিশ্চয়ই লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসি পরবর্তী কোভিড পরবর্তী পরিস্থিতিতে আমাদেরকে এগিয়ে যেতে হবে, আমাদের স্বাস্থ্য ব্যবস্থাকে আমাদের আরো অনেক ঢেলে সাজাতে হবে, এখানে বরাদ্দ বাড়াতে হবে। অন্যান্য দেশের স্বাস্থ্য ব্যবস্থা ভঙ্গুর, বিশ্বের স্বাস্থ্য পরিস্থিতিটাই তো ভঙ্গুর। সকলকে এখন বিশ্বের রাজনীতি, কোভিড আপনার ভ্যাকসিনের যে আপনার কূটনীতি, এই ভ্যাকসিন কূটনীতির সঙ্গে তো আমাদের দেশের মানুষকে আগে ভ্যাকসিন কূটনীতিটা স্ট্রং করে সেই ইয়ে করে আমাদের দেশের জনগণকে বাঁচাতে হবে। জনগণকে বাঁচানোর রাজনীতি, উন্নয়নের রাজনীতি, এই সবকিছুই কিন্তু গণতন্ত্রের মধ্যেই পড়ে। এগুলি কিন্তু লিবারেল ডেমোক্রেসির অন্য যে ওয়ে, সেই ওয়েগুলি কিন্তু এগুলি। সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ, আপনারা ভালো থাকবেন। জয় বাংলা।
I think তিনটা very critical point, three critical point. Corruption and democracy, the way corruption and democracy cannot go hand in hand, extremism and politics cannot go hand in hand too. That's number one. Number two, you have mentioned that intra-party democracy is very important, whether it is any party, in fact. And the third important point that you have brought in is that how the religion has often obstructed the political process in this country. And in which not only the government has the role to strengthen parliament, but opposition has role to strengthen the parliament too by actively participating in the electoral process. Thank you, Najma Appa. Thank you very much. Madam Professor Amina Mohsin, Madam, floor is yours. 3 minutes.
Give me a second, Shahab. Thank you very much, Shahab, and thanks to the organizers. I'm extremely sorry that I joined in very late because of some official commitments, and I had written about it to Shadhan. And I joined in when Nurul Kabir was wrapping up his discussion. So I'll just give my observations because I didn't even have the paper with me. Shahab, I'm not going to go into the politics of blaming, or I'm not even going to go into the politics of labeling anything into that. But as a researcher, you know, when one talks about liberal democracy, and particularly in the context of Bangladesh, and more so in the context of post-colonial societies, what we are observing not only in Bangladesh, but also in South Asia around us, I think it is important for us, extremely important. And I don't know if Shantanu has factored this in his paper or not. The politics of, one has to look at the politics and processes of mobilization and participation of general people into formal party politics. Because I do believe that, one observes, today one observes that there is a clear disconnect between the domain of what we call formal politics and the politics of the people. So I'm drawing lines between the two, that we, on the one hand, we see that, some social movements are going on. These are not party-based or partisan, but this I will call informal politics where people's issues are being raised. And on the other hand, we see, there is this formal domain of politics. So that's why I'm saying that one has to look, and I hope you're getting my point very clearly, Shahab, that when I say that one has to look at the processes and the modes and the politics of mobilization of people into the domain of formal politics, how it is being done, where co-options being is made and where it is not being made. And I guess the point about selectiveness was raised here. That is a separate issue. I don't want to go into that, but I would like to pick on reiterate what Kabir was saying, Nurul Kabir was saying on alternatives. I think that there where our salvage point lies. And Rizwana, with all due respect to you, I don't think so. Referendum is an alternative or an option for us. If you can flout the electoral system, you can flout the referendum system as well. And we have seen that being done during the military regimes. So that's why I'm saying that, but I do not want to go into blame game over here. Well, I think when we talk about alternatives, one has to critically look at the role of the faith-based leaders and how they are being manipulated and how they are manipulating the system. I think that is very important, particularly in the context of Bangladesh. And also we are seeing it in Sri Lanka, we are seeing it in India also. So I'm asking you to look at the societal level, that what role and what kind of role they are playing. And then the second point that I would like to raise, which I think and still believe is very important, is to depoliticize the local government system. We had a when I talk about depoliticize, it was never within the formal domain of the party system. It takes away the soul from the entire system if you make it partisan. One has to understand that. What is the objective of having a local government system? Instead of having a decentralized system, you have centralized the entire system. This is something so, it beats me. It was something so unacceptable to me, but so many things are unacceptable to many of us, but these are happening all around us. And this is not that it is something which has just, one can say that a particular regime is responsible for it. We have seen it happening through the years. There was no need of changing constitutions on many counts, starting with the BNP period. But we have seen that happening. And there were no popular demands for it. That's what I'm trying to say. And then lastly, what you have been talking about, during the discussion, that empowering the individual. How do we empower the individual? Of course, the speaker before me talked about education, talked about the health systems. I think the informal system, what I call talk about the people's politics, it comes in very importantly. Somehow we have to find a connect between the people's politics, which I call the informal domain of politics, and the partisan political system. Thank you very much, Shahab.
Thank you, madam. I think it was very, very informative and there's a lot of things to think about. I think the politics of blaming still remains as a major problem within the political discourse, particularly practical. We do a lot of analysis of media content, and that certainly comes up. Post-colonial societies, of course, in which the politics and processes of mobilization are often disconnected, if I understand madam correctly. And that means the whole synergy of processes, participation, and mobilization has to be seen from a very integrated process. Alternative is obviously the hope, as you have rightly mentioned. Referendum may not always be functional if we don't have meaningful changes within the institutional structures, within the electoral or political system. Faith-based actors are often manipulated, and perhaps this is not only the issue of the political manipulation, but certainly how society responds to the faith-based actors has to be understood in a deeper way. Depoliticization.
They are manipulated, and they also manipulate the system.
Right. So depoliticization is very important. Of the depoliticization of the local institutions or the government institutions is very important, because empowering the society or the community is of paramount importance if we want to really make sure that the politics is pro people. And in that case, there has to be a formalization, or at least a bridge between the formal politics and the informal politics or mobilization that is carried out from a political point of view. Am I correct, ma'am?
Yes, thank you very much. And I must say that I'm thinking, taking a lot of this from Partho Chatterjee's readings of politics of Bengal. I must acknowledge that.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Mr. Majid, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Shahab. And also I express my gratitude to GKS for arranging this seminar webinar. I have already mentioned in the chat already. I have drawn the attention of Shantanu, the keynote speaker, that he has covered most of the issues, but only one. In fact, last night when I was thinking about this liberal, this type of webinar, in dream, I must confess that Plato came to my mind. And when he was discussing with me about his dialogue on democracy and etc., then he mentioned that please don't raise so many questions in this type of time, and don't say anything directly because it may create more problems. Only one thing he requested me to raise here, that he has pointed out that the government and the state, the difference that should be, they must be in two compartmentalized position, because the state will ensure the governance through its institutions. The institutions which are started with the word national, thus National Board of Revenue, National NSI or something like this. And also those which are constitutional body, that is Public Service Commission, Election Commission, Comptroller and Auditor General, etc., etc. So these commissions, these national institutions, they must be compartmentalized. They must be, because these are the governance. They ensure the governance. So it belongs to the state. But Plato has mentioned last night, it is not me, and it is not be recorded for one government. It is for many governments, that the government has usurped the power and functions of state governance. So that's why, as Professor Nazneen was rightly pointed out, she was asking that why the tax GDP ratio is so low, why NBR is not in functioning properly, or whatever. So all these questions, answers are over there. That the national institutions, national commissions, state functionaries, they must remain compartmentalized and akin to the governance issues. If they can function well, then I think the governance issues, the liberal government issues, whatever we are coming, so that would be, yes, that's my point only. And I think there lies the reply of what Professor Nazneen was asking, why the other agencies like Election Commission or others, they are not making in a proper way that to establish the leadership. That's why Plato last quoted from the subtitle of the Washington Post, "The democracy is dying in darkness." He asked me to point it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Long live Plato for now. But if I summarize your point, I'm not too sure if I sound like a Platonic person, but certainly the darker side has emerged, in which there is a growing disfranchisement or dissolution regarding the state institutions sometimes. So I think you have rightly mentioned, sir, that structures and institutions should be separated, and government and the state are two different entities, two different structures. So we should be very careful about it. And government has the power and function to decide, but certainly this decision has to reflect public choice, and in which the national institutions have paramount role to play. henceforth the keeping the national institutions above controversy, if I use the layman term, is probably the best solution we can think about. Thank you, sir, very much for your comment, and I hope Professor Majumdar has taken note of your observation. May I now request a very veteran politician who has served as state minister to the government, Abul Hassan Chaudhry. Sir, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, CGS, for kindly inviting me, Zulur Bhai. A lot of points have been covered. You have a distinguished galaxy of our politicians, people from the media, people from the journalist world, and we have heard a lot of important discussions. I would not like to revisit all these issues because many of them, of course, are themes that we are acquainted with. May I just very quickly point it out that from this very large and huge bag of rather despondent thinking and some very positive thinking, let us revisit 1991, when the opposition and the Treasury for the first time got together and brought about a fundamental change in the Constitution. Probably it was the 12th Amendment. I had the honor at that time to be as a worker of the party in Parliament, and how that we could continue with that. Let us, shorn of all academic rhetoric, come directly to the point. As a citizen of this country, and I've shared this with my very, very good friend, Mr. Amir Khusru Muhammad Chaudhry, for whom I have very high regards, that had the ruling party at that time come forward to the proposal of the opposition that let's get the indemnity ordinance, which was by all accounts a very black law, which sort of stopped the trial of the killing of the greatest Bengali of all times, the father of the nation, and most members of his family, except the two daughters, which you so well know. Perhaps the story would have been different, but these are one of the classical ifs of history. But then again, the debate is raging that where do you take the Southeast Asian model, where you have economic development, and of course the people's representation then takes the backseat. I, for one, believe that at a longer time, deficit of democracy simply cannot work. We had as our chief guest here the Honorable Minister, Mr. Nurul Islam Shujon, who I know so well, and again a former colleague of mine. Now, for instance, he brings to his political presence decades of experience, sacrifice, and struggle to bring about his political philosophy into being. If we cleave on to the principle that politics does not mean that it is a negation of economic development, nor does economic development have to take place at the ouster of politics. My suggestion would be that these discussions that we are having, the CGS is organizing from time to time, and you yourself had been connected for a very long time with the other prestigious institution, BEI. There will come about a time, and I'll pause here without finishing my sentence to give you straight away an experience. When we started the journey after long years of a mighty stab in the back by unrepresentative military regimes, one of the first things that we ended up doing was to make the committees in Parliament slightly more functional, even if it is for the optics, because before that, the committees used to be headed by the ministers. So what used to happen? They used to talk in one language in the Parliament and in the same language in the committee, which was outside the public arena. The same thing happened. The fact that today the committees are being represented by members of parliament also gives it absolutely a new dimension. So I think that today the focus should be to get together our very renowned and respected sir, historian Professor Syed Anwar Hussain has indicated how the virtue lies and bringing about in seeking the thread of unity among the political parties, because whatever is beyond politics is politics. So I would like to conclude once again renewing my greetings for you to have organized this and also in the confident hope that as we travel this long, tortuous and a very dreary period, not just in the history of our country or our region, but in the world itself, we shall also reinvent, as we did in the 1990s, as we galvanized the people in 1971 under the leadership of Bangabandhu and the tremendous sacrifice of our Mukti Joddhas, when day in and day out, we were told that we must be the biggest nuts in the world to have taken on and gone into a situation which is impossible. But Alhamdulillah, within 9 months, we were in independent country, of course, at a very, very huge cost, which we all know about. So I think that through this discussion, let us take back the hope, the confidence, the optimism that the tremendous achievements that we have done. Bangladesh today is looked as a country with respect. It heads in many indicators. It's in the top of the list in South Asia. And we pray that we maintain and sustain our struggle against this pandemic, that we shall come out of all this through a united movement. And there is another thing, there is a DNA of a certain race, of a certain people. I choose to believe that the DNA of the Bengali people, as articulated in the title of the book of Professor Amartya Sen, Argumentative Indian, if that be the case, whatever we may do, we shall not be able to turn away from democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I think this is fascinating because deficit of democracy is something that we should be very concerned about, and we should debate this more frequently. And you have brought the very fundamental change in the functioning of the committees, making the MPs empowered to head the parliamentary standing committees. And I think this is a brilliant initiative that has been done over the past 1 decade. The Southeast Asian development model, Western development model, we should debate more, definitely, because we now have brilliant economists, political economists, and political scientists, veteran politicians willing to talk to each other more frequently. And this platform is one of the initiatives. Certainly, sir, 1991 is a benchmark in our history, in which the indemnity ordinance and the trial of the father of the nation's killers was much needed. And had that been the case, probably the shape and the modalities of current politics would have changed by now. Thank you very much, sir. I
do not wish to take any more time, nor shall I do it today, but I have direct experience, unimpeachable experience, how close we were to forging an unity when a sort of promise was given out to the then leader of the opposition, Sheikh Hasina, that the indemnity ordinance would be removed. Sadly, as a citizen, I do not take a partisan position. Had that been the case, we would have graduated to a very higher scale of democracy. Thank you very much. Much obliged.
Thank you very much, sir. I have exactly 1 minute for Barrister Sarwar Hussain, if that would help, because we have to wrap up the program in next 5 minutes, in which I have to give Shantanu Majumdar to speak for 3 minutes. So I exactly have 1 or 1.5 minutes for your observation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and the moderator. You should allow me 1 minute more because like you, I am also a student of Amina Mohsin. And beside that, I was an army officer and now a practicing lawyer of Supreme Court. First of all, I like to add 2 points on Mr. Mojumdar's keynote here. He said that the caretaker system is undemocratic. I totally disagree. You should understand that when in any democratic system, parliament dissolve, the caretaker system come in. That is basically a caretaker in nature. And when Bangladesh has introduced the caretaker system, there are many countries in the world has taken the same system. And how that has been resolved through the court system, we all know. And in his paper, he failed to bring that in any democratic system, the quality of the top leader matters. The quality of the top leader matters. And the top leader, the quality leader comes through the political process. Like in China, though it is a one-party system, but they can bring the best leader in their premiership, in their leadership. Now, in Bangladesh, over the period of time, we can see if it is not a failed state, it has become a dysfunctional state. And dysfunctional state comes when all systems are being weakened, if not destroyed. And to destroy a system, you put a weak person, a puppet person. That will be enough, including the education system. And in Bangladesh, in most of the system are run by the inefficient people. Now, another 2 points. In Bangladesh, why after 50 years of liberation, that for every regime, there has to be a movement. When some leader says that the opposition does not understand how to make movement, that means they are orthodox and run hangover by the colonial type of politics. If it would have been a good democracy, the system would have been run. And over the period of times, we see all ruling party tends to violate the constitutional rights of the people. So why going to the power turn to be authoritarian? And we know what authoritarian can do, that we have seen in Belarus, a 27 years in power, 68 years old, capturing by sending the fighter jet to bring a 26-year boy.
I have 20 seconds.
So my point, okay, now, just 1 minute. Now, you see Bangladesh, something like a feudal system has come. Now, all I want to suggest that to have a future liberal democracy, we need 2 things. Selecting of the leaders in the political party in a very democratic way, so that the good leaders can come. And election, people's choice through the election. Otherwise, I find there is no future of the liberal democracy in decades together. So the future is very bleak, but we should be hopeful. Thank you very much. The only crisis that Bangladesh suffers is the leadership crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sinha Bhai, 1 minute, as per the request of the organizer. I'm giving you 1 minute because we will have to wrap up it in next 5 minutes. Sinha Bhai, are you there? Sinha Bhai? Okay, is he still there? No. Let me invite Professor Shantanu Majumdar, the keynote speaker, the author of the paper, to if he has something to add or if he has any observation, and he may present it to the participants.
So did you say I have only 3 minutes?
Exactly.
Okay. So let me try very briefly. Let me start with the comments of Barrister Sarwar. He talks about the quality of the top leaders. I think it matters. It's not, of course, not in my paper, but I think it depends on the quality of the political culture of a certain polity. But I will think about it. But regarding caretaker government, he strongly disagree with my argument when I said I consider caretaker government as undemocratic. And he also said that there are plenty of evidences in this world that there are caretaker government. Let me give you 2 examples. For example, in Australia, when they call it caretaker government, it means elected government finishes its a term, and they are waiting for the election. So for that time, the government automatically transformed into theocratic government. For example, in case of Mahathir Mohamad during the in case of Malaysia during the time of Mahathir Mohamad, they used the term. The term was not also even in the constitution. What did they mean by caretaker government? They mean actually when a government finishes its term, then the central government bureaucrats take over for certain time. I mean, before the election. And I can also talk about Greece. I can also talk about Pakistan. I mean, list is long. But my point is why I consider it as undemocratic. And this is also for Mr. Amir Khusro Mahmood. He has also strong opposition about my comment. My feeling is that caretaker government is actually humiliating and self-defeating for the Bangladeshi politicians. Because by accepting caretaker government, politicians are saying that we cannot conduct our task given by the people. One. Second thing, if we see carefully, we see the big political party prefer caretaker government when they are in opposition only. This thing happened in case of Awami League, and the same thing happened in case of BNP. When these parties are in power, they never actually support the caretaker profession. Maybe one can say that then what happened in 1996? You see, that was tremendous mass movement. And the Ghana government was actually compelled. So this is kind of my academic journey. It's not necessarily Khosrowbhai. I start arguing this point from last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I'm arguing, saying this thing since along. Actually, maybe I cannot remember, but it's since along. So this is, so I really appreciate you disagree with this point. And then what actually,
Dr. Majumdar, I have to cut you off. I can just give you 20 seconds to wrap it up.
Okay, so in response to Amir Khosrowbhai's comments, one is, I'll be really glad if Khosrowbhai can provide a list of democracy strengthening military rulers, because I have great interest in military intervention in politics, and I want to be really enlightened.
Thank you,
Professor. One thing, just one thing. When I said we had to talk only about elections, when I say democratically elected undemocratic people, I didn't necessarily mean these are the people only from the opposition. Please take a look at the my paper. If you can manage time, you will see that I tried to make my point on the basis of the last 50 years. Because, for example, when I said the kind of dominant party culture, you will see that I started from the first civil regime. So that means, okay, that means I want to deal with the ongoing problems in the light of the long-lasting obstacles in our way to liberal democracy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Professor Majumdar.
You can start with George Washington, and I'll give you a long list after that.
I leave it with Professor Majumdar and Mr. Mahmood that they can personally speak, and Zoom is very easy and convenient way of communication, and definitely that will make Professor Majumdar to satisfy his queries. Thank you very much. We don't really have enough time, and I can't thank more. All these speakers have been very kind. They have provided not information and knowledge, rather they have given us wisdom. Honorable Minister has brought out a very significant position of the government. Mr. Chaudhry has given us eye-opening thoughts. Dr. Nazneen has touched upon the electoral institutions and its linkages with economic governance. Advocate Hassan has brought out the rule of law. Mr. Kabir has always talked about the empowerment of the entities, and Professor Hussain has given us food for thought that how the democratic institutions can be improved, and that would really reflect the spirit of 1971. With these notes, it is my responsibility to thank everyone, including CGS, for hosting this event. And we look forward to more events hosted by CGS in this nature, so that people can debate, eminent scholars like you, eminent politicians like you, eminent journalists like you can come together and guide the nation towards a better future. And as always, a student of international relations, I am always optimist, despite the dystopian realism across the world, because that's how the nations survive. Thank you very much, sir, for your patient presence and graceful presence, and the wisdom that you have shared to all the concerns. Thank you very much. So may I turn on today?